call the special meeting of the board vacancy to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Orr, roll call, please.
Ms. Cruz? Present. Ms. Fox? Present. Ms. Hume? Present. Mr. Malloy?
Present.
Mr. Schuster?
Present.
Mrs. Welby? Present. Mrs. Yanni?
Present.
Ms. Martin?
Present.
8 present.
The purpose of this special meeting is for the board vacant seat and has been duly advertised. We will now entertain public comment, and we have Colleen Reed.
Sorry, I was at the end, not the beginning.
Oh, that's, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Concerning the current vacancy. In the past, people would apply on this board for a variety of reasons. Many of our current problems stem from uninformed decisions the past board members have made, which includes the temporary closure of Northeast. Some prior board members were interested in the political clout, some interested in the scoring of large lucrative contracts for their families and friends, and a very small few, usually in the minority on the board, joined the board to help the children of Scranton. You have the opportunity to choose a board member that truly has the best intentions and wants what's best for the children of Scranton. The board member you should choose is someone with courage, compassion, and intellect to guide this board through recovery and beyond. I wholeheartedly recommend Ann Connell. No matter what the situation, she will always consider the education of the children of Scranton. Her outstanding reputation as a former teacher in the district will bring the board the valuable educational insight it needs to get through these tumultuous times. Please consider Ann for this vacancy.
Thank you, Colleen. Mrs. Orr?
Yes, I just need to be sure, we have all of our candidates here. Darwin Shaw.
Is public comment closed?
Yes.
There's no sign-in sheet.
Can I sign in now?
Do you have a comment on the vacancy?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before you begin, is there anyone else who would like to comment on the vacancy?
One thing that I would say, my name is Matt Barrett, I'm a Scranton resident and a parent of a student at Northeast Intermediate. Thank you all for your service to Scranton School District. I know it's challenging. I think I would just encourage the board when choosing whatever it is you're going to choose. Obviously, you all bring different skill sets. You know, I don't know all the qualifications of the candidate. You should find somebody who doesn't fit the same skill sets that you all have. Maybe there's somebody who has a specialty in accounting. Maybe that's something the district needs. Maybe there's somebody who has a specialty in marketing. Maybe that's something the district needs. Maybe there's somebody who has a specialty in environmental. That's certainly something the district needs. And I ask the person that you think to look to, make sure that that person is willing to ask the hard questions like each one of you are tonight. I know that they're ready to get into public session. I'm sure you're going to have some people that are presenting some information. And I know each one of you will be asking really difficult questions to ensure that you fulfill your duty to the students of Scranton. And so the person that you're choosing has to have the ability to ask those same tough questions, make hard decisions, separate themselves from the administration at times, make sure they're acting in the best interest of the district and the students that they're serving. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just need to make sure that Darwin Shaw, is Darwin Shaw here? I don't think he's here. So we have 3.
And you do have contact with the overflow room to confirm that he is
Yes.
not there as well?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll sequester our candidates and bring the first in. Candidates? sir. You have 2 minutes, and then we do have some questions for you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Sean McAndrew. I've been a resident of Scranton my entire life. I purchased my home here. I graduated from Penn State University with a bachelor's degree in business marketing and management. And I also received a graduate certificate in public budgeting and government finance. I'm a former president and board member of the Scranton Parks and Recs Board. And the reason I'm here today is I want to give back to my district. Over the last few years, I know there's been a lot of negative stuff going on with the district, but you could feel change. We have a lot of great new board members, and some returning great members. We have a brand new superintendent, and we have Dr. Finance Recovery Plan. Now I know it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of hurdles that we have to face. One would be the finance. We have a lot of long-term debt, and we're also dealing with the funding from the state. Districts compared to our size are getting $1,000. We're getting $1,000 less per student compared to those districts. We also, have a lot of issues with buildings that are in disrepair. We have to make sure we ensure the safety and health of our employees and our students, so they can, they can learn, they can educate. And I think with my finance background, I can help out with that. And day one, roll my sleeves and look at the finances. And also being on the board for the Parks and Recs, I understand policy and procedure, and I think that's one of the most important things on the board to follow that. So I just want to ensure academic excellence for our students, safety for everybody, and for the current students and the students in the future, because this is probably the most important time in the history of the district and the decisions we made and the process we set forward. And I understand it's not just a few meetings a week; it's a 24/7 commitment, and I'm ready to help out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mrs. Young?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for stepping up now and wanting to even apply for this seat. So your ambition is to be applauded. And with everything going on right now with the board, as you know, you're following everything. It's a tumultuous time. So you mentioned some of your motivations for wanting to join the board. Why now? Why would you want to be involved now?
Why now is because, like I said, I think it's the most important time in the history of the board. There's a lot of stuff that wasn't done correctly in the past 10, 15 years. We've hired a lot of new people. We have to ensure not only are we fixing what's wrong, but also we're setting the right guidelines for the future, so that we can't come back where we are. There's a big hole that we're trying to get out of, and we need to fix it and also make sure going forward there's a path so this never happens again.
As you're probably aware, the last 4 weeks there have been some decisions made that have not been perhaps well received. They've been hard decisions. How do you feel that you would move forward if you were faced with the contentious and hard decisions that may sometimes prove not to be in the public's favour?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the Parks and Recs board, I had to face a lot of tough decisions. One was free swim. We didn't have the money, we couldn't afford it. We came up with other ideas, free swim for certain ages, and we also did something with the district to help, send out some free passes for, good grades and everything like that. Basically, there's a lot of people affected by the decisions we make every day, whether it's, first and foremost the students, it's also our employees, and it's our taxpayers. So there's a lot of people that, are affected by the decisions we made. I'm not afraid to make a tough decision. Again, being on the board, I've had, backlash on some of the things, and I've been faced with difficult decisions, and it doesn't bother me.
Mr. Malloy?
I think my question is a little bit redundant after what Mrs. Yanni had to say, but I guess I will ask it anyway. And it is, unless you live under a rock, you realize that you're putting your name forward for a pretty tough spot. So my question is, why are you interested in doing that? And I have a follow-up. No, seriously, why are you interested in doing this?
I know, a lot of people tell me I'm crazy for it, but I just want to give back. I've had a lot of people in my life who I've watched give service to our community, and I think I can make an impact, and I think it's just something I really want to be involved. I do a lot of community stuff, with my local churches, schools growing up, and also be on the Parks and Recs board, and I ran for office before. I just think Scranton's a great place. I think we have a great district, and I think there's a lot of negative stuff going around the whole city of the district where there's a lot of positive too, and we have to show the positive and fix the negative. And I think, you know, this is again the most important time to make these decisions, and I'm ready to, you know, to be a part of it.
So my question is, what are the challenges facing our school district?
Well, the challenge is, the first challenge is definitely the buildings in disrepair. We need to ensure the health and safety of our students and our employees, because, you know, we need to provide the best education and also, you know, a safe environment for everybody. Also the fair funding, you know, we're millions of dollars in debt, and we have a lot of long-term debt. So, you know, again, we have around 10,000 students. Compared to districts our size, we're short of $1,000 per student, and that adds up. And every year that's going to keep adding up and making it harder for us. I also think, I went to one of the recovery meetings, I think we have a data issue. I think sometimes when we need to make decisions, we don't have up-to-date data to make those decisions. So that keeps delaying it and keeps making it worse, and that hole getting bigger and bigger. So there's a lot of things, especially with the data, we need to ensure that we are getting correct at the moment, and also ensuring we're collecting it correctly going forward, because that's the key. Not only fixing what we're doing now, setting the guidelines in place to go forward to make sure this doesn't happen again.
And after that, it doesn't coincide with this question, but would you be running for office again, or would you?
Absolutely. I think I can make a great impact in 2 years, with another 4, especially with the recovery plan. I want to see it through. I want to be a part of it and see it to the end. Absolutely.
Can you expand a little bit on your skill sets and how those skills would
Sure.
benefit this?
Well, first, working on the board, I'm a team player. I manage a customer service and a pharmaceutical sales team. So, and also with, I use data every day, whether it's forecasting for campaigns for our sales, whether it's, you know, giving sales report for our executives. So I think I know how to take numbers and take data and make, you know, analyze it and make a sound decision, set up a plan, and then implement the plan. I also think with my finance background, with my education, I could look at, you know, the budgeting, I could look at some of the other things, and just bring a different aspect of it, and make sure, you know, everything is, you know, that everything's being done correctly.
Ms. Cruz?
Well, first of all, Mr. Banton, I want to thank you for your willingness and your great courage for applying for this position, especially at this time. As a lifelong resident of the city of Scranton, what do you believe are the strengths of our school district? A lot has been said about sort of the weaknesses and negatives, especially within the last few years, but what do you think makes the Scranton School District great?
Yeah, the first thing is they're great students. We have students who achieve great things every day, every month, every year. We need to continue to highlight them and congratulate them, and celebrate their achievements. And I see on social media, on Facebook, they're always, you know, whether it's sports or academics, there's a lot of positive things that we're sharing. And also we have great teachers. We have some of the best teachers in the state. So I think they're both the most important part of the district.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good. All right, well, thank you. Have a good one.
No, she didn't know this, and I'm not going to.
Let me grab it.
It's not worth it. No, it's all right. Get out of your way. It's our worst falls in the night.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us again. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we have some questions for you.
My name is Stephanie Davis. I'm a resident from Scranton my whole life. For those of you who don't know me, I have 3 children who currently attend Isaac Tripp Elementary. And when people ask me why I want to be on the Scranton School Board, they say it's such a mess, and I say, well, that's exactly it. I want to be a part of changing it. I want to change the status quo. I don't like the direction of it, of where we're going as a district and a community. So I would hope to be part of that change. And that's the biggest reason for me to applying this evening.
Thank you very much. Ms. Young.
And you kind of just answered my question, because I was gonna ask you, with everything going on right now, what's your biggest motivating factor for wanting to be part of the school board?
Well, as I said, my children and are the biggest reason. But again, it's not just my kids that are attending school. There's 900 kids over at Isaac Tripp Elementary. So for them, I want them to get the best education, to get the best arts and athletics that they deserve. I don't want to see any kind of programs cut from any school, Isaac Tripp or Neil Armstrong or whatever. So that's basically why I'm here.
Ms. Hume.
Thank you. You're probably aware that the last 4 weeks, some of the decisions that have been had to be made in this district have not been particularly well received. How do you feel that you would cope with and organise the fact that we might have to take very unpopular decisions at various times?
Well, I mean, I think I would have to review all of the information at first before I went ahead and, made that kind of decision. I do think that, even though I may not agree with the decision, it would have to be for the student's best interest. That's what I would base it on.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Malone.
Thank you. So my question is, it's a little redundant, why are you interested in serving on the school board? And a follow-up question, why are you interested in serving on the school board?
Well, I actually applied 2 times. The first time came up, and I did not get it, obviously, which is why I'm here. But then I did apply again for the second time, and I didn't show up because I thought, you know what, maybe it's not a right fit for me. So when the third time, when Virginia had asked if I wanted to come, it was right after the whole thing with Northeast, and I said, you know what, I need to be, I need to at least try for my for my kids. If I can at least try and say, you know what, I need to be part of this board. This is something that, I want to do because it needs to change. Like, something has to happen. The status quo cannot go any longer. I do believe that this is, the best time for me.
Mr. Schuster.
What do you feel are the challenges facing the school district?
There's many. There's many challenges, but I don't necessarily believe that we're the only city that has to, that deal with these challenges, whether it be financial restraints or, overstaffing levels, things of that nature. There are just the solutions, or lack thereof, of what, we come to. So I think that we have to kind of think outside the box more in terms of how we come up with these solutions.
And if you were to get this position or not get this position, would you consider running for office in 2 years?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
Mrs. Malone.
Can you tell us a little bit about your skill set and what you would be able to bring to the board to complete and add to the skill sets that we have?
Sure. I think I would bring a lot of positivity to the board. I think I would bring a lot of a different just set of thinking, kind of, there's ideas that I have to, get some money into the city because our tax base is shrinking. However, the school's population is still growing. So, I think I would bring that, I just wanted to be able to just bring that different set of thinking here.
Thank you. Ms. Cruz.
Well, thank you, Ms. Davis, for your willingness and your great courage in applying for this position at this time. A lot has been made within the last few weeks of the weaknesses and some of the negatives of the district, but what do you believe are our strengths and our positives?
I do believe the students of the Scranton schools are the strengths of the district. They're the ones that, have to, well, case in point, they got uprooted from their school in Northeast, and they're the ones that are getting, different bus schedules and different, their routines are getting completely, changed. And, things that they know, their classes, the halls that they used to walk, this is now someplace new for them. So I think them going to school every day and getting, just putting in those 6 hours, they're the strengths.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself, and then we have some questions for you.
Great, they told me that there was 2 minutes, so I thought I would jot down some remarks. So, good evening, my name is Ann Connell. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of the board with the hopes of serving on it. So I've not been very active in local politics. However, the past few months and even the past couple of years, I've been, increasingly concerned about what's going on in the district. And just all the different issues that seem to be just popping up, literally, or falling down, I guess. So then, when the board seat opened, I just felt compelled to try to do something to help. I think it's important to have a teacher on the board, just because, I worked in our classrooms, I worked with our students and our families, and, I know how the schools are run, and so I just think it would be a positive thing. So I worked for over 30 years in the school district, and I worked for about 1.5 years on the secondary level, and then I moved to on the secondary level, and then I moved to the elementary. And as an itinerant, I worked in literally almost every building in the district, so I'm familiar with all of the buildings. And also, because of that, I feel like I know the student community, I know the parent and family community, and I know the teaching community, and I also know the tax-paying community that we all know. And I think that those communities are what make up the school district. And the school board and the administration, as I see it, are there to serve and support those communities. And so, that being said, I just would like to be able to help any way I can in that. So, I don't have a financial background, and we didn't do a lot of finance in preschool. But what we did do was we worked a lot on communication skills, working together, learning together to solve problems. And, I'm very interested and eager, to look into the budget and the recovery plan and understand whatever needs to be understood to help and to find out ways that we can try to solve some of these problems. I think we need, just decent, hardworking people that are willing to be transparent, willing to be accountable for their decisions, and just have the students' best interest at heart. And I promise to be hardworking and decent and have the students' best interest at heart if given the opportunity. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Yanni?
First, I just want to say I applaud your dedication to the Scranton School District. So thank you for that. And with that being said, you're following everything that's going on, and it's a rough time for us, the school board
Yes.
right now, it's a tumultuous time. So what's your motivation now for wanting to be part of this?
Well, I looked at sort of, you know, all of the members of the board and all of the different domains that are represented. We have, you know, business people, we have attorneys, we have educators, we have administrators. And I just felt that, you know, it would be a plus, a positive thing to have a teacher on the board. And I'm very fortunate, I'm blessed to be retired, and so I feel like I have time that I could devote to, you know, to fulfilling the responsibilities. And so, again, I just felt it was, you know, sound corny, my civic duty to just give it a try and offer my services. And so that was basically why I was motivated.
Thank you.
Ms. Hume?
Given that you taught preschool for such a long time, this is probably a silly question, but the hard decisions. How do you feel? We've had to take some very hard decisions very recently. How do you feel that you would cope with having to make a decision that would not be well received by your former colleagues, by your former students and all of this?
That's a great question. It's a tough one. And I'm not exactly sure how to answer that, except to say that, you know, I think if I had all of the information, like I went on the website and I was looking over the budget, and, you know, and it has the amounts for whatever, teachers, administration, maintenance. I feel like I need more detail than that. Like, what exactly under all of those things, where is all that money going? Because I feel like you mentioned maybe cutting services or programs. I think that has to be the absolute, positively last resort. I do. I feel that that's the last resort to do anything like that. But, you know, if you have all of the information, and if you actually go into the buildings and meet the people and find out what the best course of action would be, I mean, if there was no other alternative, then I suppose, you know, I would be okay with that. But I wouldn't be okay with it, but I would do it. I'd have to, I guess.
Thank you. And thank you for surviving so many years in preschool.
Oh, it's the best job. I miss it terribly. I miss it terribly.
Mr. Malloy?
Not to be too repetitive, but why do you want to do this? I mean, really, why do you want to do this?
Well, basically, like I said, I just, my heart's broken. I just feel bad. I mean, I love this district. I love the students and the families, and it's difficult, you know. I just hate to see it having such difficulties, and for whatever the reasons have been, you know, here we are, you know, and I just, as I said, I just feel like maybe I can help. I don't know, maybe I can help, and I would be happy to try.
Thank you.
Mr. Schuster?
What do you feel are the challenges facing the district?
Question.
Well, I think there's a lot of different challenges. Obviously, the financial challenges are difficult, but, you know, I also feel like some of the challenges are, I'm trying to think of the right word. I think everybody is, what's the word? I think everybody is kind of down in the dumps. I think everybody is not positive, and they're trying their best, but they kind of feel like they're not getting anywhere. And I think that goes for not just the teachers but for everybody, the administrators, the board, because everybody is trying their hardest, but there are still these difficulties. So, you know, I just think it's obviously we could get, and it's not just proper funding, but I think if everybody felt like they were supported, that everybody would feel better about what they were doing.
Would you think of running for office in 2 years?
As I said before, I'm not really very active in local politics, but I don't think so. But you know, who knows? Never say never. But I would say probably not. But I don't like to be up doing this kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Can you expand a little bit on your skill set and what skills you would be able to bring to the board as a complement to, you talked about that a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think, again, and I hate to be repetitive, but like, as a teacher, I'm comfortable with all of the buildings. I know the day-to-day operations of how the buildings run, and I know, like the successes and the challenges that are faced every day by the students, the teachers, the facilities themselves, the buildings themselves. So, I think that would be helpful to have have the wherewithal to understand all of that. But also, again, I have some free time, I can go in, I can meet with people, I can talk to people. I feel like that would be helpful to be able to do during the day. I know that, I've been to some of the board meetings and people are saying, come into the buildings. Well, you're probably working during the day. And so, I think that would be good. And I've always, been a team player. Preschool was kind of like a big family, and we all worked together. The first 20 years I was in preschool, I was in special education. I did the early intervention program. And then the last 10 is when I was an itinerant, and I was in 4 schools every day, and it was a lot, so I just decided that I was going to take the classroom, so I just did the early childhood part of it.
Ms. Cruz?
Well, thank you, Mrs. Connell, for your willingness and your great courage to apply for the seat at this time. A lot is made of the negatives and the perceived weaknesses of the district, but as a resident of Scranton, as a former teacher of the district, what do you believe are our strengths and the positives?
Well, it's a wonderful community. Even now, and morale was the word I was thinking of trying to figure out before, but like, when times are down, like, this is what happens. People come out, everybody, the community is a very strong, close-knit community, and everybody supports the students, which is really the ultimate goal here. And so I think that we have, and again, I can speak from experience, but we have a wonderful, wonderful teaching staff. The faculty is excellent, and so many just wonderful individuals that just work so hard every day. And then again, the community support, I think, is so important, and that's I think our ultimate strength.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wrote all this stuff down.
Thank you.
Now, do I have to go back down the top?
Yes, please. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Doherty, Ms. Hall, can we call on you again? Thank you.
My,
like pass or something? So we need all pass?
Yeah. Yes. I thought it was. My wife was. You've seen. Oh, okay. I'm not gonna I've been always promoted.
Sorry, no, bring that out for the record, Catherine, thank you. Make sure Ginny got that. Are you going to announce this?
Is that what, do you want me to go through the?
We'll bring the candidates
Bring them
in.
back in? Okay, sure.
They're so used to this phone. They're so used to this, they don't need me now. What is the problem?
No. We do have everybody back in, right? Candidates, applicants, however we want to refer to you. Thank you so much for coming forward. Again, we had a wonderful discussion with all of you this evening. I think we've been so lucky in these last several appointments to choose from a wonderful pool of candidates. And I certainly would encourage you to stay involved and to consider running if you're not joining us this evening. So thank you. Mrs. Orr, will you tell us the tally, please?
Sure. Mr. Sean McAndrew received the most votes, so at this time, I will ask for a motion.
Yes.
To
We have a
appoint
motion.
Sean.
Roll call.
Ms. Cruz?
Oh, on the question, pardon me.
Sorry.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's been a
On the
long day.
question, I'd just like to say something. Although I think that Mr. McAndrew is very well qualified and that he would be an asset to this board, I am going to reserve my yes vote tonight for another candidate who I think would better serve the board at this time with her educational background.
And
Anything else?
on the question, I found that the hardest decision I've had to make for a long time. That I think we are blessed, as President Goodman said. We are going through rough times, and that people are willing to jump on with their own bucket to help us bail is fantastic, and congratulations to all three of you.
So I'll reiterate what Rose said. Thank the three of you guys for coming out. It's good to see people being a part of this and willing to step forward in tough times.
Pretty sure we all feel that same way, so please consider, when the citizens are left to vote, we want some options, and you all bring very different backgrounds, so please, I know it's intimidating as a parent and such to jump in, so, we'll help you out if you need. So, and you spoke wonderful, as you three did, so thank you, appreciate it greatly.
Anybody else? Roll call, please.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Hume?
Yes.
Mr. Malloy?
Yes.
Mr. Schuster?
Yes.
Mrs. Welby?
Yes.
Mrs. Yanni?
No.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
7 affirmative, 1 negative, motion passes.
Mr. McAndrew? Oh, yes, we do need to be sworn in.
It all happens very quickly.
Yes.
And you have to stay now.
Don't forget.
Mr. McCann, congratulations on I'm going to swear you in.
Thank you very much.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. I,
I,
Sean McAndrew,
Sean McAndrew,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey, and defend the Constitution
obey, and defend the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
and I will discharge my duties of the office with fidelity.
I'm sorry, I didn't have my reading glasses on. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You do too, yes?
I am.
Oh, David. Signature, yeah. Just signature, I'll fill it.
Okay.
Yep, right there, you're good.
All right, sign and leave.
Good.
Thank you, guys.
Now you can take your seat, Mr. McCandrew. Sorry, I just forgot that.
Thank you. Yes, that's your packet there this evening. Yes. As we say, buckle up, right? May I have a motion to adjourn the special meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? Are we okay to move ahead, or does anyone need a brief recess? We're all okay? Keep rolling along. Then I will call the work session to order. And I don't remember, do we need roll call at this time?
Yeah, we have.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Ms. Cruz?
Present.
Mr. McAndrew?
Present.
Ms. Fox?
Present.
Ms. Hume? Present. Mr. Malloy?
Present.
Mr. Schuster?
Present.
Mrs. Welby?
Present.
Mrs. Yanni?
Present.
Ms. Martin?
Present.
9 present.
9.
Well, before we begin this evening, I do want to thank everybody for their patience over the last few weeks, their determination to right this difficult situation. I appreciate our environmental specialists, experts, gurus, however we want to call them. I appreciate the hard work of the administration, my colleagues who have worked alongside them to learn a great deal about our environmental issues. And I don't dismiss how challenging this has been and what a struggle it was to uproot these students, but I would be remiss if I did not applaud the way these students have handled this situation. It is remarkable, and I had the opportunity to, Mr. Doherty joined me on a tour of West Intermediate and South Intermediate today, and the students are impressive young men and women who are handling a difficult situation. We have teachers and administrators who are making the very best of this, and I believe that this evening, with our environmental people on hand here, we will be able to get a comprehensive look at where we stand today, what our options are going forward, and that my colleagues will have the opportunity to hear the firsthand information that I have been able to be at the table to learn in these last several weeks. And this is a challenge, because for all of us to meet together and hear the same information at the same time, it must be done in a public forum. And this is our first opportunity to really be together, hear all of this information, and ask the questions. So I appreciate you all bearing with us as we get a first pass at this information, learn where we stand, as I said, what our options are going forward, and then take the necessary steps to get to where we need to be. So with that, we do have a brief presentation on East School. We'll make that last, okay? Very good, thank you. We will have an update on Northeast Intermediate School from Dr. Pichardi and Mr. DePietro.
I'll lose a little bit of weight next time I come. So thanks for having us, thank you very much. My name is Joe Pichardi, and I'm representing with Rocco DePietro, Mike Walter-Sadis, and Thomas Jimmy, the environmental folks. We're the environmental guys the folks just talked about today. So what I'd like to do is take a couple of minutes and just to review where we're at and what information that we have, and then give you expectations either as a parent of a child who's in a building or in any of the other buildings, and an opportunity to ask questions. It's the school board as well too, so that we can come up with a good path that goes forward. So about 3 weeks ago, there were concerns in the Northeast Intermediate School. That concern dealt with wall plaster. Wall plaster traditionally has asbestos-containing materials in it, and asbestos-containing materials are a concern when we inhale them, when we inspire them. They're lung toxins, so they cause things like asbestosis, the mesothelial diseases, lung cancers, and things of that nature. So if there's a chance that asbestos fibers look like little lightning bolts. So if you inhale them, they get into the interstitial area of your lungs and they stick there. What happens? The white blood cells attack it and you start to have a little blockage, and sooner or later it turns into a lung cancer or a blockage or a mesothelial disease. So we try and keep asbestos fibers, those little lightning bolts, out of the air as much as possible. About 3 weeks ago, there was a concern for the plaster-containing materials in the Northeast Intermediate School. The concern was that there was asbestos identified in some of the plasters that were there, and there was EPA was notified as well too, came in and looked at the situation and said, is that a hazard? Can you tell us if that asbestos is going to get up in the air, get into people's lungs, or get into the children's lungs and the teachers' lungs and be a problem? I know Datum Environmental Products, and Mr. Jimmy can talk about this in a minute, but was called in to do some immediate actions. And they did some immediate stabilization to make sure things weren't seriously wrong. We came in, did an inspection, and did an additional, we gave the recommendation to do an additional 19 actions in the school while we were sampling the plaster both in the old area and the new area of the school. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if the old area, I believe, is about a 1906, 1907 construction date, the new area being about a 1930, 31, 32 construction date. I'm looking at my guys here to help me out. So both of those obviously were in the time frame when asbestos-containing materials were used. So we came in, we gave the recommendation to do some additional stabilization of the plasters and areas of the building. That has started from Datum Environmental. And we also looked at the samples in each one of the areas. We followed the EPA's recommendation to take a look at each one of those rooms that could have wall plaster that's degraded in it. Now let me stop for a second and say we know from looking at the older reports over the last 25, 30 years or so that there's asbestos in that building anyway. I was there myself this afternoon. I came up and I walked through this afternoon, and I know that we looked at the band room and the auditorium, and there were some rooms where we know there's asbestos containing materials that are there. So it's not an asbestos-free site. The big concern right now is what do we do with the plaster in the walls? So at first we got samples back and we saw levels of a little bit below or a little bit above 1%, 2%, 3%, low levels of asbestos materials in the wall. What did we do? Now let me stop there for a second and say at 1%, greater than 1%, some of the regulations, the EPA regulations, for example, although not all of the regulations, not the OSHA regulations, not the occupational health regulations, but at that 1% level, it's the cutoff where some additional regulations happen versus some regulations not happening. So 1% is a cutoff level. We saw levels that were 0.9%, 1.2%, 1.5%, 2.3%, 0.5%. They were right around that 1% level. So again, we reanalyzed them, and we identified that all of the samples, we had them reanalyzed at an accredited lab, and we identified that all of the samples were at or below, in the old wing of the school, the 1% level. So, what do we know so far? And Mike and Rocco and Tom, help me out if I'm wrong here, because I know you guys have been living this for a week or two. But what do we know so far? We know there's asbestos in the building that is in a condition that has been maintained for a long time, like the band ceilings and places like that. We also know that there's asbestos in some plasters in the building, right at or below the levels that EPA regulates. So what did we do at that point? We went back in and we recommended some additional stabilization and then some additional inspections occur to see whether that asbestos could be stabilized and if there's a chance that it's going to get up into the air or not. Because remember, if this entire wall is asbestos right here, I can lean against it like this, my kids can lean against it, and it's not a concern because it's not friable, it's hard, it's solid. It becomes a concern when it gets up in the air and I inhale it, and those little lightning bolts start to stick in my lungs. So we took a look again today, we came up today, we took a look at the building again and looked at what stabilization had occurred from the Datum Environmental Products Company and tried to look at it with the best environmental eyes that we had. That, to me, that means, is that going to cause a problem? That's not just take a lot of samples. That's try and analyze that to see if it's going to hurt anybody by getting up in the air. So, what do we know? We know that there's some asbestos there and it's in good condition. We know that there's some asbestos that over the next, I'm going to suggest, week to 2 weeks or 10 days or so, is going to be stabilized, although not all of it, and it's right around that 1% level. As we walked through today, we came up with one additional concern. That was we saw some of the ventilation systems in the building. We got a little bit dirty this afternoon. We went down in the basement and looked at the old 1900 ventilation systems, which kind of interconnect the areas of the building. Why is that important? Ventilation systems to a building are like lungs are to you. You know, and that's where the air comes in and that's where the air goes out. That's how it distributes through the building. You know, if it's a concern, that's where you're going to find it. If it's not a concern, and you look there and it's not there, it's not going to be a concern because it's not going to get into the air where you're going to inhale it or your kids are going to inhale it or inspire it. So, we were not able to determine today the status of those ventilation systems because there are about, help me out guys, 4, at least 3, 5, 3 that are, at least some of them maybe 1906, 1907 era. Some of them are interconnected to the old steam tunnels that ran under the streets from outside that have the old steam pipes in them and the asbestos coverings on the steam pipes. Some of them go up to the ceilings. Some of them do distribute into some of the classrooms. All of this is to say that we're not comfortable yet making a recommendation that that building is completely safe for what we call non-protected occupancy. We need some more information on whether all that dust that's in that room that nobody goes into, and probably nobody has been in it for a year because it's down in the sub-basement, is the same dust that the air blows over and goes up into the classroom on the first floor, the second floor, third floor. So we want to answer that question in the short term. We need to get a little bit more information in the next couple of days. So what's our recommendation and what can you expect from us? Our recommendation is that the building is not ready for what we call non-protected occupancy. And then you'll hear that term, you'll see it in our reports over the next couple of weeks. Non-protected occupancy means there's no chance of harm for adults and kids. You know, you don't have to go in there with a respirator. My second kid's got asthma pretty bad. So he has some additional requirements in some places when he goes into buildings. That's not non-protected occupancy. When we say it's ready for non-protected occupancy, we want to say that anybody can go in there and there's not going to be a concern. So, who can go in there right now? Well, people who are briefed, people who know not to touch this, not to do that. The environmental people, some of the building staff, some of the district staff. And again, we're suggesting that non-protected occupancy shouldn't occur. So what are we going to do? We're going to look at the ventilation system. We're going to suggest that the environmental contractors complete their 19 areas so buildings and areas are stabilized. And we're going to then answer, or you can expect 3 things from us. I'm going to suggest through the school board and the school superintendent. The first thing that you can expect from us is to give you a routine status report as early as tomorrow so that this information is in print and you can see it, you can understand it. You can ask questions and we'll give that to the superintendent or the board and you can post it appropriately or you can have us do it, whatever you want to do. Just so you know the current status and have a place to ask some questions. Number 2, we have a valid question, I think, which is what about the coats and sweaters and books, stuff that's in the locker rooms and things like that. Not only do we need them for educational value, but we may need them because, hey, if it was my son's sweater that was in there, I'd want to have the sweater back. So what are we suggesting? We're going to go back and take a couple of dust samples, not air samples, and identify whether there is a sufficient amount of dust there to cause a concern or not. A sufficient amount of asbestos in the dust to cause a concern or not. We use the same approach. I'm an old environmental guy, so if I get too much in the weeds here, folks, just say, Joe, shut up and just tell us it's good or bad or whatever. But where do we use that approach? When buildings collapse, like the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. I worked on that project for about 6 years. The question was, it's dusty in Lower Manhattan. Is it safe? And there were 110 stories of asbestos that collapsed. Is it safe to go back into my apartment 10 blocks over? And what do I do with my clothes? And what about my kids' storybooks? And all the same sorts of things on a less large level right here. And in concert with the EPA, we'll be able to go back in and look at some dust levels to be able to say, under the worst case scenario, you or your kid or somebody's in there and they're kicking up the dust or whatever, it's not going to get up into the air and it's not going to cause a concern. So I'm suggesting, my first suggestion was we want to keep you routinely updated. My second suggestion is going to be that we want to answer the question for you in the short term about books, coats, baseball gloves. I opened the locker and there was, backpack in one of the lockers today, so that you can safely remove that. And we're going to do that by sampling the dust in the building to tell you, not just today, but over the last 10 years, 12 years, 14, whatever, 30 years, that dust has or has not accumulated to a level where it could be a concern about. I'm going to post in I'm a transparent guy, so I'm going to post in our letter to our report to the superintendent and the school board what the levels are that you should be looking for. Use a number of 5,000, for example, so that when those results come back and you see that we did them appropriately, we did the sampling appropriately, that you know, before you even see the numbers, what's good and what's bad. You come up to a traffic light and you see it's red or green. You know what's good and bad. I want you to be able to know that this number is good or this number is bad, and you have no concern about your kids' coats and your, geography books or whatever else you're dealing with that day. So that's the second thing we're going to do. The third thing then we're going to do is probably going to take us a week or so, as I said. In addition to the data people stabilizing areas of the building, we've got to look at the ventilation system and interconnections and where things are going and where things are moving and what happened with the ceiling tile that had some water on it and fell down and what's behind that. And get you a recommendation, a good recommendation on what we believe you need to do to safely occupy the school for the non-protected public. Non-protected being kids, so that even if it's my son with asthma that's got to go in there, there's not going to be a problem. And then I would suggest, obviously, that you follow whatever those guidelines are. That's up to the board and superintendent, and then you move on from there. Questions from the board?
I have
Makes
about
sense.
10 minutes worth, so if you want me to go first, I'm happy to do it.
Please do, because you'll probably have the same questions that others do.
My name's James Malloy, it's right in front there. I was the newest guy until a few moments ago. Am I correct that Guzik on August 20th and 21st of 2019, according to a report dated August 22nd, conducted TEM air quality tests of Northeast, I'm just going to keep saying Northeast as a shorthand, of Northeast, and found no asbestos fibers?
Help me out, guys.
Yes, there is a report here. It was sampled, as you said, August 20th and 21st. There are,
I can show it to you if you want, sir.
I have it right here. I'm just doing this quick count. About 15 samples here.
So I think the point is they did TEM samples. A TEM sample specifically identifies asbestos. It stands for transmission electron microscopy. It's a big term that means we can see very small fibers which are asbestos and differentiate them between fiberglass, fiber wool, and asbestos and the other things. There are other samples that frankly are less expensive where you can assume that things are asbestos, but with a TEM sample you know it's an asbestos fiber.
Okay, so
Can I just ask that question?
I'm in the middle of a question.
Okay, sorry.
So, as of August of 2019, the TEM result was no asbestos fibers detected, is that correct?
John reading the
Yeah.
report.
I can hand it to you.
I believe you.
Okay.
I believe you.
All right, so then Guzik on January 29th of 2020, as indicated in a report dated February 4th, 2020, did bulk testing of the Northeast and found that the plaster does not meet EPA qualifications as ACM, or asbestos-containing material. Is that correct?
I'd say yes, yeah.
That's correct, sir? Do you want to hand that one to you?
Yes, I think.
Okay. I have some scratches on it, you can ignore.
Oh, yes, I did see this report. These results did come back. A few rooms came back at less than 1%.
The 1% is the EPA criteria that we're talking about.
Yes, so this report is less than 1%, room 334, the remaining were not detected.
So, as of Guzik's February 4th, 2020 report, there was no asbestos-containing material in Northeast, correct?
Plaster.
Right?
That sample was limited to plaster.
Right, and the testing in August of 2019 was not limited to plasters, correct?
That was air sampling.
Okay, and there was no asbestos fibers detected, correct?
Correct.
So we have a test in August of 2019 and a test in around February of 2020. No asbestos, correct?
I think you have to be cautious when you say no asbestos, because no asbestos means 1% or less. So if the result happened to come back at 1.1%, it's asbestos. If it come back at 0.99%, it's non-asbestos, according to the EPA definition. So in our world, we look at that exposure potential. The other thing I'll mention is, I'm sorry, Mike, the other thing I'll mention is...
Sir, I'm in the world of trying to decide whether 900 children should have been and should still be displaced.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at two reports here that say non-asbestos containing material, is that correct?
I'm sure you're looking at those reports. I'm just giving you the definition of
Okay.
non-asbestos containing materials so you can make an intelligent decision.
Joe, could I add one thing? These reports are limited to certain testing. There are other reports, there is existing documentation that lists numerous other items, materials that contain asbestos.
Okay, could you tell me about those?
Pipe insulation, ductwork, floor tiles. Yeah, the acoustical ceiling.
Okay.
So the two reports you're looking at are some isolated sampling. The August is air sampling. The recent sampling in January with the February report is just plaster sampling.
All right, well, let me look at your report then, from February 21st. And it says at the bottom here, under results, all plaster within the 1931 wing of the building are non-asbestos containing material. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then it goes on to say, a total of 7 rooms in the 1906 wing were identified as containing trace amounts of asbestos and plasters. All results are below the EPA classification as an asbestos-containing material. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Are you aware of any other testing, bulk or air, other than the
Yes,
3 reports?
there is a 3-year reinspection plan that is posted on the district website that lists the, it was done by Guzik, formed by Guzik, with some asbestos results and asbestos building inspection results there.
Was that the August 2019 report, sir?
That's a different one.
Okay.
Yes.
So is it fair to say that under the EPA classification, Northeast has no asbestos-containing material right now?
No. That's
Why is that not fair to say?
That statement is just limited to the plasters.
Okay.
There are other asbestos-containing materials. Okay, for the insulation on ductwork, insulation on pipes, floor tile, acoustic, yeah, some acoustical finishes.
Okay. And in your report dated February 21st of 2020, you indicated, out of an abundance of caution, Cacciardi recommends handling materials as asbestos containing, even though they're not asbestos containing. Did I read that correctly from your report?
Yes, that's in our report.
Okay. Why did Cacciardi decide to treat non-asbestos containing material as asbestos containing material?
So the EPA rules on asbestos containing materials, the 1% or greater, then beget you certain regulatory requirements. You do things every 6 months, you do things every 3 years, and you basically put up a program to monitor that. Our recommendation was that you have some asbestos in there, not meeting the EPA criteria. You mentioned air samples, for example, too, that were identified as clear, and I'm sure they were. Keep in mind, when you do air samples, it's because there was a project inside of a contained area where the air samples were taken. We're worried about the whole school. You know, we're worried about what's outside the poly or the barriers too. So I hope that helps.
It does to some extent, but I'm interested in what the words abundance of caution mean in that sentence. What is an abundance of caution?
In our world, there are some things, think of it as a traffic light. There's green lights that we know are safe, are not going to be a problem. There are red lights that we think could be a problem, so we recommend certain things. When you're in that yellow light area, we try to err on the side of caution or on safety, especially when it deals with situations that are carcinogens like asbestos.
I understand. I know we're talking a little bit of cross purposes, and I'm going to try to make it easier for you. So,
sure.
I define the word abundance as meaning a very large quantity. Can we agree on that? That's what that means?
Sure.
So then, if you were just to exercise normal size caution, would you treat Northeast's non-asbestos containing material as asbestos containing material? Or is it just out of an abundance of caution?
I'm not sure I understand the question you're asking.
Well, I'm just reading right from the report. It says
Sure.
out of an abundance of caution, and I'm saying an abundance is a very large quantity, right? So what would be a normal amount of caution? Would you treat non-asbestos containing material as asbestos containing material out of normal caution?
We would do a risk analysis. So we would look at each specific situation, each school, look at the potential for damage, significant damage, things of that nature, and then make a decision on the exposures. How does the asbestos get into the air? Is it in the ventilation system? Is it going to be kicked up in the air? And make those decisions on risk based upon the things that we see.
Okay. Now, I don't know if this is directed to you or maybe to Mr. Jimmy. I know that someone told Mr. Doherty, and I think Mrs. McTiernan, several weeks ago, that they couldn't go into the building. Was that you, Mr. Jimmy, who told them that, or do you know, was it somebody from Cacciardi?
It was the recommendation after meeting with the EPA and everything that until we had definitive answers that no one could go into that building.
No. That's your recollection, sir?
That was our guess.
Okay.
And that was through Blues, there was just so many unknown answers at that time.
And there still are, sir. I'm trying to find out who told.
Well, a lot of the answers have been answered now.
Okay.
Okay? When this decision was made, we were called there because specific classrooms that were crumbling, the ceilings above the windows were in so bad disrepair, they were crumbling down. It was on a complaint from a teacher. They had evacuated several rooms. And we sat in that building that night and we looked and basically said, this cannot be stabilized overnight or any time in the near future because it's in such disrepair. And then this question started coming back as to exactly which rooms were sampled that showed up with the plaster, and that's where it was determined that there was a sample on the second floor that showed, but we didn't have a sample of any of the rooms on the third floor. So that report that you referred to earlier about the bulk sampling that was done initially, that was specifically in the 4 rooms that were evacuated with specific complaints, so we would have had the answers.
And was there quality testing done in those 4 rooms?
No air quality testing was done at that time. We were waiting for bulk samples to come back.
So just so that we're clear on this, the district, and by way of extension, the board was told, we can't go into that building because who said so? Just so that it's clear. I know it's a little repetitive.
They said it was unsafe.
Who's they?
It was Guzik Associates, and I backed them up on that.
Okay. And that was
And I would back that decision up to this day,
That was
because
based on
the
the-
answers were just not known. So we sealed the area off and made it safe until we could get answers to say, yes, it's safe to go in there or not.
And do you have the answers now?
Could you go in there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
In certain areas. I mean, right now, we're still recommending certain areas to be left off limits.
This is I don't want to get into asking multiple witnesses questions like an impeachment inquiry or anything like that, but this is really for anybody. What changed from August of 2019 to January of 2020 in Northeast? If anything, if you can tell me. Did something change?
I can tell you what we did over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah. We weren't in the building until early February, so we can't comment on what was there before.
I think this is.
Did Mr. Jimmy just answer
Right,
that
yeah,
though? It was that the.
What changed was
from-
we were called there because of concerns and complaints that they were concerned about their house.
I'll tell you exactly what happened. Mr. Doherty, for the first time, stood up in front of everyone and identified areas that have never been talked about before, including, he spoke about the lead and he spoke about the asbestos and the plan to remediate, because things have not been done. And at that point, he got up, he spoke, there was probably 4 people in the stands here.
Stands.
That's my life. So it was probably 4 people. The next day, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Doherty, it was quiet. The day after, we start getting pictures and things, and immediately we went into action. So what changed? And we have, Mr. Doherty was found notes from January of 13 when he met with Guzik, again addressing, and in those notes, it said no emergencies. So when we are notified of something, we go into action, and that's exactly what happened. So he stood up, he said something that's never been talked about before, and the response that we got from teachers and principals of pictures coming in. At that point, one of the pictures that came in were from Northeast. We immediately called Guzik and Datum, who went over, addressed those issues, and that's where this came to be.
Okay, so then, is it fair to say then it wasn't a test result or a environmental standard so much as it was a visual inspection of crumbling
and
plaster
lack of information.
that caused the decision to recommend that we not use the
And
building?
lack of information to know that it was, I could not, and I would stand by the decision to the day I die, tell a kid that he could have gone into that school that next day and tell them that they were 100% safe.
I just have a question. So although the numbers weren't at the 1% or might have been lower, through the sampling that you are going to be doing soon, you're making it very clear that although that number might not be at that regulation, it can accumulate and become above that, correct? which is why we're sampling the dust.
Correct.
So although that number is not a risk, like, nope, sorry, these kids could be there, they can't be there, no matter what, you're putting them at risk because you do not know what accumulated in the dust of the lockers, in the ventilation system, which you're testing and whatnot.
Correct.
So if you're looking at the safety of children and parents and anybody in that building, you cannot base it off those numbers alone.
Correct. And you can't base it off the numbers of the process that occurred 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago too, because
Correct.
materials changed.
Could I also say that the 2 air samples that were taken in August 2019, which came back clear, President Gilmartin and I inspected those areas with Mr. Doherty on Friday. There was asbestos remediation work done in a metal room, which is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, in the basement at Northeast. It looks like I kept expecting 1948 alumni to come walking out of there going, where are we? Weird thing. And a section of lagged piping in that same basement area. That was remediated by, I think, I don't know if you did the work or Guzek did the work, but it was remediated in August. There has been concern from the public about what was this done and were students at risk. No, they weren't. This happened down in the basement in areas where those kids did not go. There was no way that any student or staff member, possibly excepting for the maintenance people,
I just want to add, we did move the orientation. We did move the orientation when that work was being done, just to err on the side of
fantastic.
Correct.
So that was done, and the TEM samples that came back clear were not from the bulk of the school or anywhere like that. It wasn't like somebody went through the school and took 50 different air samples. They were specific air samples that were taken in the basement at Northeast. One in the back room where the lagged pipe had been repaired, replaced, although the bucket of dripping water might need to go, and one from the weird metal room. So those TEM results could not possibly, to my understanding, and I'll defer to your.
Did somebody go throughout the 50 rooms and take TEM testing the second time? Oh, I thought you were done, I'm sorry. You're not done?
You cut her off, she gets to cut you off. Very nice, you two.
To answer your question, the reason for air sampling at all under the EPA regulations is to identify that a specific response action, they took asbestos off the pipes, for example, it was completed.
Yeah, this is total misinformation.
Joe, I'm just reading this report now. This is, some of the air samples were done as a baseline, as what's called here as, at the request of Mr. Kelly, as a precautionary measure. So these are not our typical post-abatement clearance samples.
Yeah.
And they are throughout the building. It seems, I'm taking a quick glance here, first floor.
Okay.
I'm sure there was a second site, so you're probably not incorrect, but that's not what's
The report I read
was
was
referenced
TEM
here.
samples were taken specifically after that remediation work, so I apologise for
Sorry.
inaccuracy.
I apologize.
And the one comment I will have on this is, I don't know what the status of the ventilation system is. As Joe had mentioned, we don't have a good handle as to the ventilation system. So if there are issues within that ventilation system and air samples were not collected while that was occurring, we just can't comment on whether or not, what's gonna happen when that ventilation system occurs. It's not, I don't see anything in the report here that says HVAC system is running at optimal capacity.
Well, I can tell you that as a private citizen for 51 years, and I've been a public servant for about a month. So, but I've tried to educate myself about what's going on, and I know a lot of parents in this room have as well. I haven't heard about digging into the HVAC system or dust samples before this very evening. So is that a HERA protocol?
A HERA protocol is designed for post-abatement actions. There are other risk assessment protocols used to answer questions like, is the rest of the building safe? Is the ventilation system interconnected, and is that a concern? So you're kind of meshing apples and oranges.
There are some requirements for what the HERA, the EPA regulation for asbestos, what to do when you see damaged material. The terms they use are damaged and significantly damaged.
I am curious as to why the ductwork has only come up this evening. I am curious as to why this is the first time we're hearing about the ductwork.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, in the 2019 three-year re-inspection report, it identifies significantly damaged material in the ductwork itself. This is from the would have been Guzek re-inspection of August. It's posted on your website. we confirmed that there is suspect material there, it is not in great shape, and we can't tell where the air moves from. It's a series of catacombs and tunnels that it is just unconscionable to understand where this stuff goes after looking at it for an hour.
Thank you. Just curious.
Sure, no problem.
Just curious.
But that's not, that data that says this asbestos, this is confirmed, sampled, no question about it, greater than 1% material, is in the ductwork or in the HVAC room or in the fan room or in storage rooms that are used as plenums to carry common air through the building. It is in that report itself.
Why did the 3 reports I just talked about earlier say non-asbestos containing material?
Charty reports?
That was specific to the plaster.
Well, and the Guzik reports, and then the last one being like the Charty
Obviously
report.
can't speak to Guzik reports.
Right,
Well,
but
he did.
yeah, the EPA's recommendation was to focus on those plasters, and that's when we were first brought in. Initially, that was our first objective, was to assess those plasters.
Was that a recommendation or a requirement?
We talking about the EPA?
Yes, sir.
EPA.
I didn't hear.
I mean, it was the individual from the EPA, as we all sat around the table, made it very clear on what I would believe listening to this, which is all brand new to me, that I would say, he would say the recommendation was to do that.
Can I just ask a question here as a parent? Because I think we all need to learn from this going forward. I think there was a lot of miscommunication, and a lot of parents probably are sitting here thinking that. So I know you weren't in on the initial Guzik reports, but so that we can learn, again, going forward here, did we need to close Northeast based on what you know now, not based on Guzik reports? But did we need to close those in an overabundance of safety or out of concern for our kids? Did that need to happen, or could it have waited until a break, a summer? What's your thoughts?
In my opinion, you could not have done nothing and still been defendable. So you had to do something that's there. The first step of that is to get some professionals, these guys, to take a look and see how bad the situation is, where does it go, is it interconnected? And I think we're still in that process
And
right
Mr.
now.
Jimmy, you're saying that you stand by that now?
I stand by that now. And I've been in I've been in every school that has asbestos.
And that's based on what test result? And
It's
what,
based on
what
physical
environmental
appearance.
standard?
On the second and third floor of the school, as you walk through that school, the floor tile is cracking and crumbling. There's little pieces.
So
Yeah, this
it's
is
based on no test results, correct?
Well, yeah, there's tests that show that that material is asbestos, and the material is
Non-asbestos containing material.
No, the floor tile and mastic are asbestos. They're greater than 1%. They're defined by the EPA. It's a regulated material, and it is in a damaged state that needs to be addressed. You can't have kids walking over this tile. I saw little pieces. That little piece is going to keep on deteriorating, and eventually it's going to become a powder and get airborne.
Can you just tell me again, what's your background? What's your experience with this? Because I don't have any experience with asbestos, so I'm listening to you, so.
We're
share
a
that.
certified abatement contractor for over 20 years.
Okay,
We're state certified.
okay.
Would you
That's
tell me
important to
again what the positive test result was and where it was and where we could find it online, for
Okay,
example?
I think what we're getting confused about is the concern was about the plaster, okay? That was the main concern about the plaster. However, the plaster is not the only material identified in Northeast as being asbestos containing. There are large quantities of pipe insulation. The second and floor hallways on the old section, on the 1906 section, 1,600 square feet each, the floor tiles are asbestos. There's floor tiles in several classrooms, and the mastic are asbestos. There's acoustical ceiling in the auditorium and in the basement hallway. On the 1931 side, that is asbestos containing. So the confusing part about, like, if you look at the report, and it's what we've done through every school, it was given, each areas were given the numbers. That was the first meeting, the last meeting, the 1, 2, 3 numbers. If you look at the report for Northeast, I haven't seen it, but I would bet that there's some concern about the floor tile in the hallway. okay? And that's not to be questioned, that was sampled and it's asbestos. And that was done as part of the initial AHERA report that's on the district website.
How does that compare favorably or unfavorably to, let's say, West Grand Intermediate or South Grand Intermediate?
The condition of the tile. And like, I've been in West Grand Intermediate, and the floor, there's no cracks, the tile is in stable condition. It's waxed over, it's encapsulated, it's not, I believe, there was one area in West Grand Intermediate, I believe we had to remove 3 damaged tiles, I think it was off the pool in the storage room. So that's what we've been doing, is going and taking where it was listed in the AHERA report, where Guzik listed these areas as being damaged, that's what we've been going around, and we've been responding to reports, emails from teachers, as they come in, concerns, and that's what we've been addressing.
The last thing I have is, are you aware, Kachardi, Datum, are you aware of any air quality test results at Northeast that showed asbestos-containing material as opposed to non-asbestos-containing material?
Guys?
No, the only air samples I'm aware of are right here.
Is it possible to do air testing, let's say, tomorrow, and maybe get the test results in like 6 hours and find out if there's airborne asbestos in Northeast?
Is that possible?
That's what I'm asking.
Absolutely, that's possible.
Okay, thank you.
So there's been a lot of talk about some work that Guzik did in August and in January. Mr. Doherty, are there any representatives from Guzik here tonight that can defend the work they did?
No, again, I invited them, in fact, I invited them on Valentine's Day. They did not respond. They notified me at 4:45 today that they would not be attending.
And why?
They said on advice of their lawyer.
Okay, so do they owe us any work and do we owe them any money?
I'm not sure, you'd have to ask Mr. Laffey that. The last time, we had engaged them on doing bid specifications for summer work.
Okay.
And we recently got those 5 separate packages for summer work from them. I'm not sure of the invoice status for that. But they're, at this point, that would have been the last project they were working on.
Can you answer that question for me, Mr. Laffey?
Yeah, currently at this time, the invoices we received, we're waiting to sign off from our maintenance department. They've not been processed for payment at this time.
And Mr. Doherty, we do have the complete 5 packets of bid specifications. There is nothing outstanding from that?
No, we have them, but when we do appoint an environmental consultant, as you know, there is an RFP out there. I would think it'd be in our best interest to have whoever that environmental consultant's gonna be to review that before we see bids for that.
So, if you want to say it or should I?
I would recommend, what can we do to dissolve and terminate our relationship with Guzik Associates?
We don't have to engage them in anything. I mean, right now, they're not engaged in anything other than, like I said, the final was the bids.
Would our solicitor suggest that we make a formal statement to them, some kind of letter confirmation that we're not going to go forward? We have completed our last project with them, or is that not necessary?
I don't think that's necessary.
I'd like to learn from this going forward. I mean, we can't go backwards. So we can't give the kids back, put them back in the school for the past few weeks. So we've got to move forward. So I think our communication has to improve. So I'm just going to state that right out. I think it comes from the board, from administration, down to the principals, to the teachers, and I've had several parents and teachers approach me about that. So I just want to make that suggestion to all of us here, that we work on our communication with this. But we need to move forward. We need to do what we need to do to put the kids back in there safely. And I want to reiterate that I think every decision that was made in good faith and in the best interest of the children. I don't see where it's going to do us any good to go back and forth with this report said this and this one said that. This is where we're at. So, my kids went through Willard, my kids went through Western Intermediate, and they went through West Grand High School. So I can say that I was comfortable with my kids being in the school, and I would trust these gentlemen to go in there and make the right decisions for our kids.
Ma'am?
Can I just say that the definition of crisis is a sudden occurrence of which the outcome immediately is not known and the results could be catastrophic. I am so pleased that tonight we are sitting here discussing how we got here, rather than sitting here discussing the fact that 900 kids from Northeast have been sitting in asbestos-riddled buildings and in danger. We now know that despite the irritation that parents have about all of this, that we are not facing that catastrophe. I was dreading that we were going to get these results back, and we were going to get results which showed 5, 15, 20% asbestos, which would have meant that our children seriously had been put in danger by this district. And I am relieved that tonight what we're discussing is how did we get here and how did this happen, rather than, my God, my kid has sat in that classroom up in Mr. Waters' classroom for 3 years. No, sorry, he sat in the back before Mr. Charlie, I wasn't doing that. We haven't got a parent sitting in this room saying, my God, my kid was breathing in asbestos in this room at school for very things. I have done the best I can in the last month. I had brain cells I was saving that are now used up with asbestos. I was saving them from when I got older. I have done the best I can in the last 4 weeks to educate myself about asbestos. What I have learned in the past 4 weeks, and I've read as much as I can, I've been to the University of Google, I've gone through the administration, that cannot compare to the decades of experience of the people who have this. Mr. Jimmy, we were talking on Friday at the school of the number of schools that you have been in, and the fact that you have that. Nothing that I can educate myself with myself can compare to the eye that you have after 20 years of work. I appreciate very much the fact, and I'm sorry, I reiterate what Director Yarni said. Every decision that has been taken up till now, whether you agree with it or not, whether you think it should have been done differently, the good faith of this board, this administration, has always been, if there is the slightest risk to the children, we will use an abundance of caution. And I am just so thankful that tonight we are not sitting here saying that young Matt or young Jonathan is got to go off and have his lungs tested because they've been sitting in asbestos-riddled buildings that were crumbling as they were on that floor. And I want to thank you guys for...
Director Hill, thank you for pointing me out, and I appreciate that.
No, sorry, Matt.
I appreciate your concern for my son.
I do. I mean, I'm sorry. I apologise. It wasn't meant to be personal. I love young
No, I'm
Matt.
just wondering, do you know if there's any slight harm to little Matt right now at South Intermediate? And if so, what's the basis for your determination?
No. We can't accept public.
Oh, I'm sorry, she engaged me.
I apologise. I apologise for using that as a thing.
Maybe somebody else on the board will ask that question.
Well, if you do have a question, Matt, please submit it to Mrs. Orr, but we can't take public comment because we didn't advertise that we would.
Oh, no, that's not a problem, no.
It was pointed out to me that I did not have a child at Northeast, but I know a lot of those kids. I have a lot of great kids that I care about, not as deeply as I care about mine, but that I do care about.
I think this might, if no one has any specific questions they want to have addressed at this juncture, I think this might be a good opportunity for Mr. Jimmy and the representatives from Cacciardi to talk about the work that has been completed. That's the next item on our agenda, if I can find it here somewhere.
I think some of the parents are writing down questions.
We can go back to
Oh,
that,
okay.
but I think if we
We're still
can,
covering
thank you, yeah, if we can begin to address.
Well, now, to address as to what's happening now. Now that we have the answers that we need, which is what needs to be done to open up, to get this school back open. So, as Dr. Cacciardi pointed out, there's a 19-point bullet item based on a walk. Now, this does not include the issue that came up this afternoon with the air handler system. Okay, this was specific areas, 19 areas throughout the school where the known asbestos materials are damaged in a damaged state, has a chance to become further damaged. That should be addressed before the kids are brought back into the school. So we broke it up between the night because discussing a plan going forward, the 1931 side has a lot less work, time frame that needs to be done as opposed to the 1906 side. So that work was started today. There's 10 bullet point items that has to be done there. The work started today. The abatement end of it will be completed by Wednesday. And the 1931 start of it. We were worried about one of the rooms, we're taking up the floor tile, and we weren't sure how the floor tile was gonna come up, but it's coming up.
Shorter nails in
Yes.
this building?
Yes, a lot.
Good.
Okay, so that's being done. In the 1906 side, there are six other areas, with the biggest chunk of that work being the floor tile mastic in the hallways in the first and second floor. The anticipated time frame for, I would break that work in the 1906 side into 2 separate phases. And the first phase of that is to address those 6 areas, with the bulk of it being the floor tile mastic in the hallways. That work, if approved, would be completed within either the first Friday in March or the Tuesday or Wednesday in there. There's 3 rooms that were brought to the initial complaint. And it's room 334, 337, and 336. These are rooms that were tested with the plasters, and these are the rooms that have the deteriorating plaster conditions, that it's beyond encapsulating. What we would have to do is call it an enclosure, which is basically drywall the entire room, caulk the seams. That's gonna take some time. Our recommendation is, I know that these rooms, when the school was first shut down, they were being evacuated, and there was other places for these classes to be held, would be to seal off this area of the hallway, as long as it's confirmed with air testing and everything that it's not strictly common airspace, would be to seal that end off, and that would be something that could wait for summertime work. So you would only lose the 3 rooms. So without the issue of the air handler that just came up, within 2 weeks, the abatement work would be done. Now, obviously, the new flooring would have to go in, testing has to be done, the new flooring would have to go in, and furniture moved back in, but the abatement end of it would be done within 2 weeks.
And just so I'm clear with the new issue of the air handler this evening, and this may be a question for you, Dr. Cacciardi, what you're recommending is dust sampling in those areas, and if it is determined that that dust is not asbestos containing, they can simply be cleaned and we can move on?
So I'm asking myself 2 questions. The first question is, I saw a lot of dust in the building. Does any of that dust contain asbestos at levels of concern because of anything that happened over the last 20 years or whatever? Whether it's the projects or the pipe lagging or the ventilation system or anything else like that. The answer to that also answers the question about what happens with the books in the lockers and those things too, because they're all in the building. You know, if it's dust and it's not asbestos containing, it's okay everywhere. The second part of your question really will answer whether or not any areas of the school can be contained or not, because we've got to trace this 100-year-old, almost looks like a chimney that goes left, right, up and down to see where that goes to. And we don't have an answer for that right now, so it's really 2 questions there. Once we find out where that goes to, we can answer questions on where the dust could have gone to and whether the areas could be segregated or not. That make sense?
Mr. Cacciardi, are we going to trace the HVAC system in other 16 buildings as well?
The reason for tracing the HVAC system in this building is that we know that there is asbestos-containing pipe lagging in areas where it originates. We know that the ventilation fans have a ton of dust on them, so if the dust comes back positive, then they could be, transporting it through the school. I don't know that about the other locations, but I'd be happy to take a look and say, yeah, it's worthwhile or it's not.
I don't doubt it.
If it's worthwhile to do the sampling, then I'd recommend the same thing. If it's not, there's no dust, there's no asbestos there, then it's not.
So, additionally, there was work throughout the district over President's Day weekend.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
We, President's Day weekend, we took six schools, and the work that was done there was based off the HERA reports that were on the website, which would have taken care of all the level 3 issues or less. These were areas that were originally deemed like pipe chases behind walls and bathrooms that the children didn't have access to, and there was no direct airflow through them, so the school didn't need to be shut down, it didn't need to be, the rooms didn't need to be closed because the kids didn't have access to these areas. But there was insulation, the insulation was in poor condition. So there was some floor tile work that was done at Prescott School. There was additional encapsulating work that was done at Willard School. And West Side, we did some encapsulating work, we did floor tile removal at the high school, and some pipe insulation removal in areas that were previously closed off.
Mr. Jimmy, how do you then, when you do that kind of work, how do you then clear a building for occupancy?
A third party hired by the district comes in and clears it, which in this case was Kachardi.
Does that require any testing at that point?
It does require, if certain quantities, yes, it requires testing, and the laws state that I can't hire the third party, it's gotta be done directly through the district.
Okay. And what is done by that third party, to your knowledge? What
It's a visual inspection, that we did our work, that there's no dust or anything in our containment areas, because each area is set up as a containment, that there's no visible dust, and that there's no remnants of asbestos left back, and then they perform their air testing.
Okay. So air testing is required to clear a building?
During the abatement process, yes.
I don't always not know the answer to the question I ask. Just most of the time.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
At this time, I would just like to say, we've seen, obviously, most of us are kind of new to this and seeing this difference in communication and process. And since you all stepped into the picture, I feel bad that you're at the brunt of frustration right now because you've done amazing things for us and for the district and for the children. So I just want you to know that we really appreciate it. We've gotten information we've never gotten before. We're getting told things that we've never been told before. And I understand the frustration completely that everybody is dealing with, but you guys are doing your job to the best of your abilities and beyond from what we've experienced before. So I just want to make sure that you understand that we are very grateful for you at this point in time. As an administration and a board, the children's best interest always has to be at heart, correct? I understand that shifting children around is obviously the last thing we want to do, but the first thing we always have to do is put their health and safety first. So when we don't have definite answers and whatnot, we can't take a risk. Being as my child is in the district, also she's not at MEIS, but I would understand if someone told me my daughter had to move just in case, I would say thank you for taking the precaution and moving her until we get those final results. So I know everyone has their different opinions, it will always happen, that is the case of being on a board and an administration team, you're always gonna have someone who hates what you do. Either way, but grateful, most of the people who are voicing their opinions and such are doing all aspects, and we appreciate it, obviously. Voicing opinions opens us up to new information we didn't have and new viewpoints we didn't have. But you are aiding us greatly in this process, moving it around, getting the children where they need to be, and getting us to the place we need to be. Also, just clarifying, we are not at all speaking about closing MEIS, actually the exact opposite, we're selling the building, so I appreciate everything that you've done for us, and thank you.
What?
No, we're not selling.
No, I said not,
It did sound like you just announced the sale of the building, but that has not transpired here this evening, everyone.
I just have one quick question for the consultants here. Am I correct, just from listening to you speak tonight, that much of determining whether a building is safe or not with asbestos in it is visual inspection?
That's correct.
Because that's something I'm just learning tonight. So, and it's based on your experience and visual inspection is what made you make your decisions.
That's correct. I'll take it a step further and state that the EPA asbestos regulations for schools identify different response actions based on the type of material and the condition that it's in.
And it's one of the reasons why a 6-month surveillance inspection is required under the EPA rules, is because we know materials are subject to vibration, to weather, so plaster that was good in 2016 may not be the same condition as 2019, and that's
Thank you for
part of the reason
explaining
why
that.
there should have been inspections.
And just to clarify, I understand from the things that after you had done work there, you also did a visual inspection, you redid the visual inspection in the other schools in the district? Would the district require?
Yeah, just to be clear, on the President's Day, Valentine's Day weekend abatement, we did the clearance assessments, independent of Mr. Jimmy, and limited to those areas that were deemed high priority. So in every one of those contained areas, there was a visual inspection to ensure there was no residual dust. Any identified abatement was done and completed, so there was nothing left on a pipe, there wasn't a piece of floor tile or mastic left behind. And then there was air samples, either the PCM air sample that just we count every fiber, or the TEM, as Joe described, the very specific, depending upon the size of the project, we would do an appropriate clearance. Out of 6 schools, 53 samples in 14 functional areas that were abated between Friday night and Saturday night, I guess it was ultimately, all eventually passed visual and an air sample, a series of air samples, multiple air samples.
When we do air sample, in terms of an explanation, when we do air samples after a school project, an area might be contained like this room. By regulation, we go in first and see if there's any dust there. If there's not any dust there, we take a leaf blower and run it for 5 minutes to kick up the dust that we didn't see. Then we take a fan for every 2,000 square feet, blow it on the ceiling or the area that was abated, and then do the air sample. So the air sample is not the typical come into the room and let's see what you're doing today, how much is in the air today. It's designed by EPA so that it finds those minute quantities or other quantities of asbestos that may not have been removed, so that you know that it's safe for the future, because it's a walk-away level, it's a green level.
I may be stealing one of the parents' questions, but I have a feeling that one of them is going to want to know, and I, as a parent with the kid in the district, also want to know. I've heard talk that from a visual inspection standpoint, South Scranton is in the same shape or worse as Northeast. Can you speak to any of the parents' concerns about that? And if you can't, that's fine. I just wanted to, before you got out of here, I wanted to ask you that question.
Have we been in South Scranton? I haven't.
I've not. No, we've not been asked.
I have been, we've addressed the areas that were of concern, everything that was listed, and there were a couple of emails that were sent out, and we responded and addressed specific concerns at South Scranton. At South Intermediate, on the initial night, there was some piping and some ductwork in the basement hallway that was encapsulated and wet lagged. There was piping that was encapsulated in room 206. Room 205, after the initial onset, there was some damage that was done to a pipe. Somebody was stabbing the pipe with a pencil through the encapsulating area. So that room, along with the 2 rooms next to it, we have vacuumed as an abundant of caution, and then the maintenance constructed wood boxes around those pipes so they can't be disturbed. And then we did some work in a basement server room and a maintenance office. They were the areas that were brought to concern. I know I did walk through, I believe there was some concern about a floor tile in the cafeteria, but it was a small, it was a crack, it wasn't straight through. So there was no immediate action that would needed to be performed, they just need to keep an eye on it.
And you didn't recommend that South Scranton Intermediate be closed?
No.
Thanks.
So, where are we going from here? I think you discussed a lot of our options in the building going forward. Are we at a point where we need to make a determination here? Are we at a point where you need to gather more information and come back to us about the ventilation system? what action do we need to take tonight to move forward? I mean, not official action, I know we're not at a voting meeting, but we authorized the work to begin in the 1931 section. Are we continuing forward with the other information that's been presented to us? Do we have more questions?
So my understanding is that in discussions is, and again, it's not a voting meeting, so the board will have to decide how to do this, but my understanding was that we would move forward with the work on both sides of the building at this point. I don't know why, if that, I don't know
That
why
was
we wait.
my understanding as
Right,
well. I just want to
yes.
make sure everybody's.
And then the additional information, we would wait for at least the work in the building that they have identified would begin. Mr. Jimmy, the newer side, that has already begun.
That already, yes.
Correct.
So the newer site has already begun, and I know you have it separated into 3 areas, 1931, the 1906, and then the 3 separate rooms. Are these going to be done separately? So are we going to do the 1931 and then 31 is
The
completed?
1931 side will be completed by Wednesday.
Okay, so you're going to start with that one?
Yes, that's already started. And like I said, it could be, I'm bringing in extra crews tomorrow night to try to get it done. But it may run into Wednesday a little bit.
Well, I guess my question is, it's not, you can't complete them together. It's going to happen.
Well,
1931.
yeah, it's gonna go right, well, if we go to the next side, it would be started on Wednesday.
And if we get the samples, the dust samples out of the HVAC system, suppose we took the dust samples out of the HVAC system and they have no asbestos in concentrated dust areas, is it still necessary then to do a speleological expedition through all the ducts, or can we just say that if the dust is clear, it's clear?
So we're suggesting dust samples, not just in the ventilation system, but on an example of the books and sweaters and things like that. So the first question that you should hold us to is, what should we do with the books and the sweaters and things? The second one is, where does that ventilation system go so we can identify whether there's any other interconnection? That tells us 2 things, whether any of the building can be separated, which it may or may not be able to be, and whether that did distribute dust in other places or not. Because it's dusty in that system.
Yeah. But if the
So that's
dust...
step 2.
So that would be necessary to determine whether, when the abatement work is done and the clearances are realized in the 1931 section, whether that could be separated and we could utilize that portion of the building.
Correct.
We need that information to answer that question.
Okay, so it seems to me that, and that can be done independent of the abatement work, that can
Correct.
start tomorrow?
Yeah, we basically started it this afternoon by poking around, so we'd like to finish.
Yeah, so, but I'm
Give
just
you
saying,
an
it doesn't
answer.
have to wait till that abatement work, so we can. So at least we are moving forward, we're in a better position tonight than we were yesterday, and we're in a better position than we were last week, and we do have a clear path forward. That we're now getting the abatement work done, we're moving along a clear path forward.
But I suggest that one of the things that we suggested is to put out a frequently asked questions or a fact sheet or something so that everybody can see the questions. It seemed to me from some of the, I'm happy to stay and answer the questions right now if you'd like us to.
Sure.
But I'm also happy to publish them, give them to you if you want to publish them so everybody sees
That's
them.
what we would like to do.
We would like to publish.
So everybody can see it, not just the people in the room.
So my last question is, are you guys going to be on hand for next Monday's meeting?
If you want us to be, we can be
I
here.
think we do.
Very much so.
Sure.
Do we have anything else on this matter at this time?
What about South?
We can't entertain questions because we
I know,
didn't publish.
that's why we passed them off, Rachel.
Right, and we'll answer those.
No, well, my son's in South tomorrow.
Abundance of
Do
caution.
we,
Is there a slight risk?
Abundance of caution.
we're not taking public comment this evening. You have submitted your questions. We are going to pass them to Dr. Kachardi. We will address them.
Our kids are in South tomorrow.
Dr. Kachardi, if anyone here feels as though there's anything that needs to be brought forward at this time, please do it. Mr. Doherty brought forward this information that let us hear. If there are any concerns that you have seen that have gone unaddressed, please let us know. Yes, sir.
Yeah, President, good morning. I understand there's an overflow room. Are there people downstairs?
There are people downstairs, so we
Then they
need
should
to
be,
also collect
hopefully, we're collecting
their
index
questions
cards
as
and
well.
questions.
Yeah,
from
that's
them.
Yes,
set up.
yes, that's set
Okay,
up.
thank you.
When will we expect the answers to the questions?
Thank you. I think that could start as soon as tomorrow.
We should be able to, it may not be 8:05 in the morning, but we'll get you answers to the questions. Even if that answer is we need to look a little bit further, we'll, give us a couple of hours, we'll get them all answered.
Would you just go one question?
No, we did not advertise for questions.
No, we're
this
talking about
evening.
Mr. Kachardi, not you.
No,
That is
I'm not
correct.
Mr. Kachardi.
I think that's up to him.
Yeah, that's right.
That'd be great, Mr. Kachardi,
Okay.
if you could say.
Right. Okay.
Okay, we're moving on.
Yes, we are.
Well, I
We
just
have
want to
an
say to you, Mr.
e-school update. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to say to you, Mr. Riccardi, and to your associates, for being confident enough in your business and in your work, for being present and for speaking up, because it's so important to us and for engaging communication.
Thanks for
May I?
We're here to help. I mean,
Yes.
That's what
I
we
know
do.
there's been a request for Dr. Kachardi to stay and answer questions. I'm not going to recommend he does
Okay.
that.
Okay.
And it's not for a lack of information. It's so that everyone can hear the same thing at the same time.
Okay. That's, I
But he's
think
not
that's
gonna be
reasonable.
So if the questions are posted online, like you said,
That's
the
correct.
answers, and as early as tomorrow.
Is it, would it be possible, and I realize this might take a little work and a little figuring out, but as part of the recovery plan, we do have an area to submit questions online. And with this frequently asked questions, information, the fact sheet that you're discussing that I think is going to be incredibly helpful here, and I don't think anyone would say we didn't wish we had that 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, or since the inception of this district. I think that's gonna be great. But would it be possible to look at setting up a specific area on the website, similar to the recovery plan, perhaps outside of that maintenance district, all of those tabs, but somewhere that we could get right to and have a place where people could submit questions, so that then that would allow us to get through them and answer those, not that we want to ignore anything, but that, you know, if we're seeing the same question 10 times, we're answering it once.
Mr.
Could we
Audio, I know
look
the
into
board's
that?
not taking
Mr.
questions, but with regards to, is there a reason why Mr.
Mr.
Kachardi
Barrett.
couldn't answer questions? I'm sorry, I'm not directing the board. Is Mr.
We
Audio?
are not taking questions this evening.
I know, I'm asking Mr. Audio, he's not a member of the board.
It's out of order.
Okay, we're gonna move on. We're discussing the potential of trying to get more information.
Yeah, I think, Katie, Paul, can we get, technology should be able to set something up.
I think
Correct?
me and Rob Noon set that one section up, so I think we can do that. Maybe.
Okay, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. E-school update?
Yes, Mr. Doherty will update you on peaceful.
Sure, if you remember going back a few months, David Rice from Power School was here talking about how our version of eSchool, we're essentially 4 versions behind. And the benefits of moving to version 1911. Initially, that was going to occur over between Christmas and New Year's. eSchool was not ready at that point to move ahead. They were not ready to for their hosted clients. Then the next target date was President's Day weekend. Again, eSchool did not move any of their hosted clients, so now that eSchool upgrade is scheduled to occur on March 7th. I just wanted to keep the board informed on that.
March 7th, you said?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Yanni?
Yes, so items for consideration at the March 2nd board meeting.
under budget and finance, there will be resolutions to approve a bill list, resolution to approve exception bill list, approve delinquent tax reports, approve the treasurer's report, approve repository sales, approve budget transfers, approve charter school refunding reform, and a discussion and a resolution to award an RFP for auditing services.
Thank you. Do we have a discussion on the auditing services at this time?
Yes, I'd just like to give you a brief update. As you are aware, according to the district's professional service bid timeline, the auditing services for the 2019 financial statements and moving forward was recently published. We had inquiries, and the RFP was sent to six firms, with 3 firms providing a response to the RFP. The summary was provided to the school board this past weekend. So we will be doing a more thorough summary this week, not just looking at the price component, but also, references, all the other criteria to meet the response to the RFP, and we'll provide it to the board with a recommendation for Monday night.
What types of things are we going to take into consideration there? Because I mean, at first glance, I looked at the price. I know we have a relationship with one of those people that we've used for years.
Correct.
I mean, I don't mind getting some new eyes on it.
No, absolutely, no, I think, each firm was asked to provide a response to how to accomplish the audit within the time parameters that we have. We hope to kick it off around April 1st with completion prior to September 30th. So there was to be a plan on how to execute that. We would like a firm that has some experience auditing school districts of the size of the Scranton School District. So client reference was also provided. Those are things that we'll be looking at.
Mrs. Yanni, do you want to?
Yes, items for consideration at the March 2nd board meeting under education. We'll be looking at a resolution to approve permissions to attend West Scranton High School Spanish class field trip to New York City and West Scranton High School Scholastical field trip to Atlanta, Georgia. A resolution to approve the amended 2019-2020 school calendar, and a resolution to approve the equity plan. Under technology, we have a discussion for the 5-year replacement plan.
I just want to point out, I put information in your packets. Our district has not had any kind of plan for the replacement of technology. Typically, the technology that's in the buildings now is funded through the student technology. The Chromebooks that are being utilized are funded at the building level. We have a great need to get computers upgraded that are hooked up to our smart boards, and there's a tremendous need for it. Our district in the past had been purchasing refurbished equipment, so most of the equipment that we have out there is upwards of 8, 9, 10 years old. And we're taking parts out of broken machines and putting it into other broken machines, trying to make it work. I would like to begin starting on the staff side, getting a 5-year replacement plan in place. And the machines we would purchase, they would come with 5-year warranties, so our machines would always be under warranty. There is money in the technology budget to cover that, and I think it's critical that we do that moving forward.
And this was a topic that we also discussed as part of the shared services committee with the city, Mr. McAndrew and Mr. Schuster and Mr. Laffey. So I think if there are opportunities to get our timelines synced up and look for ways that we can go out for these things together, that would be ideal.
I think when discussing with the city and the county, there were going to be some technology purchases coming up. I know they weren't as large as ours, but I think we could see some savings with the joint purchase.
Absolutely. I think it's important to put Paul or someone from our technology department in touch with the representatives from the city to make sure that obviously the models and the equipment that we're purchasing fits both entities.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I just make sure that we could put the field trips under consent?
Yes. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
That was my fault, I wish you put that there.
Ginny, it's not like you have anything to do over there. Come on. Get it together. Ms. Hume.
Okay, we have a discussion on the work order management system. At the Act 10 meeting with the AFT Grantley Federation of Teachers recently, this came up, that we don't have a system that is coherent, whereby we can get instantaneous updates, work orders and all of that. Mr. Excuse me. Mr. Doherty has put a solution for a group called Dude Solutions, which I'm not sure isn't a bit sexist, but never mind. It's called School Dude. It is a system whereby there would be an ability for people to directly log in issues and problems, if I understand. Perhaps you should speak to this, Mr. Doherty.
Correct. I mean, currently, there's no work order management system. Within our maintenance department, there's no effective way to be tracking work. This would allow us to allow anybody, allow a teacher, allow a maintenance worker to submit a request for work, and then it's all going to be tracked, and it's going to be able to tie specific jobs back to specific purchase orders. And it's going to also take us, hopefully in a much better direction with preventative maintenance. I think it's necessary. This one piece of software is used in over 200 school districts in Pennsylvania. It's used at Lackawanna, it's used at the medical school. It is a very tested piece, and the cost overall for it is not outrageous. But I know we had talked about that at the article.
Yeah, I think the cost was $12,000 for the year, and
Yes.
presumably that would save us an enormous amount of both personnel time and chasing around and lack of systematization.
Certainly with organization and documentation and
Yeah.
work tracking, and it's.
That's cheap.
Now, the training to use the system, how, is it just one of those sort of drop and go, click and go systems?
Well, it is. I mean, it's also app-based. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said I was extremely proficient with it. I mean, I've spoken to them many times. I did a virtual webinar with them. It seems very simple to use, and their training is virtual.
Okay, so there is support and training for people?
Yes.
And I noticed that there's a kind of a seminar, tutorial kind of thing called Do University. And would you be able to, which is where it's a course that you go to, and it's a residential thing for training and for working out all of these things. Would you be able to give us a recommendation as to whether or not it would be worth the district sending someone to that?
Absolutely. I mean, if you'd like, we can reach out to the gentleman I've been working with here, and I mean, we could do another webinar if you want to. If you also want to see it firsthand.
Oh, no, I'm cool. I'm just thinking of someone from the district, not from the board, but possibly from the.
No, I just mean we could,
Yeah. Oh, I think it's cool.
Are you saying have a demonstration of it? Yeah, I think that would be great.
Okay.
And Paul, is this not something that can be a function of our current CSIU software?
I don't know the answer.
Probably not.
From the research I did, there were several of these systems. I looked at 4 of them, and apparently not specific to.
Not what we,
Not to
not
the
the type
extent
that
of what
we
we
have,
do
and
right
not to
now.
the extent.
To my knowledge, I'm just learning about this right now, but to the extent of what we need and the amount of the system, no.
I mean, this certainly seems like a well-respected program. I have heard I mean, there are a lot of people who seem to recognize it. There are a lot of people who kind of perk up when School Dude is mentioned. But I think if we could at least explore that we are certain that our CSIU would not,
I don't believe it.
could not get to that point, just for clarification, that would be helpful.
I don't believe it does. I will confirm what other modules it has. We recently engaged the assets inventory module related to it, but in terms of the work order system, I'm not exactly sure if it has the capabilities of what Paul's referencing.
And when you talk about other modules, do those come at a cost?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so there's also the possibility that even if that exists, this might be at a better or the same cost.
Well, I mean, there's the same thing. There's additional modules available through Food Solutions also. There's a capital forecasting model. There's a fleet inventory. I mean, we could look at additional pieces. Right now, it just seems like we don't have an effective way of tracking what's going on. And I think we have to. We're a massive business. We have to
Absolutely.
know.
I mean, this is, no matter how it happens, this is absolutely a needed function. But if we do go this way, does it speak to the other systems as we need it? Are we aware of that, or is that still part of the?
Does it speak to CSIU?
CSIU or any other software? I mean, that's just something that comes up a lot in the shared services meetings as well, and, you know, discussions that we've had even at the tax meeting the other day about things speaking to one another and being compatible.
I don't think we know that.
Okay.
And I'm not sure you need this one because it's kind of, I'm pretty familiar with the system and it's more of a standalone. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
she
use
used
this
it.
system. And it's, I don't know that it needs to be compatible with the fiscal system, for example, okay? We certainly can check on that, but it really is a standalone system and it's really used to track all the things that we don't do now. And it's pretty easy to implement, and it's really wonderful.
And I think user friendliness is also,
Yes,
you know.
exactly.
I think that maybe something called School Dude might be a little easier to work with than
Right.
CSIU, so.
Right.
Certainly the research that I did, and it's certainly nothing like the research you did, Mr. Doherty, but the research I did showed that this kind of standalone specific area for just tracking it. It's like a Volkswagen Beetle. It knows where it's going. It'll get you from here, it'll get you from there, and it'll do everything on the way. And maybe it won't run, you know, it does exactly what it's meant to do, and it's not going to break down on you.
So for clarification, just because this is something that I'm pushing for, because for the numerous things that need to be fixed in this place, can we, if the operations budget has the money in the budget to support this program, and the answers to your questions regarding CSIU
Yes.
are answered, may we move forward?
Yes, yes, and do a resolution next week, yeah.
Perfect.
Now, Mr. Lappin, we did discuss something similar to this in that shared services committee. And the county has a system, where the system, I mean, I know this one seems more specific to schools. I mean, I think you did say that this will work with municipalities too, but do you know of the systems that they're using, and can we use something similar, or do you think this one's the best one for our needs?
I'm not exactly sure what systems the county is using. We can reach out to them prior to next week though and have an answer for them.
And I think we were looking at cost too, because of the cost of this program and what we've read about it being as successful as it is. You know, I don't know of any other, I mean, I'm not aware of any other program that fits our needs like this, that is this, you know, the amount of money that it's gonna cost us. That's really where it's at right now.
Well, that's the answer I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, we're trying to go as cheap as we can, so, and get the product that we need. You know, this will give the teachers, the maintenance, the ability to put in a work ticket, then to get feedback that that job was actually done. Then Pat in the business office takes it, knows the job is done, knows that what was needed for the repairs, then we pay that bill. Right now, there's too many hands in the pot, and the information's not getting where it needs to be, and we're having to double check and triple check to make sure before we pay the bill. It's not efficient.
It goes back to what we talked about communication-wise too.
It also helps with tracking of where your people are working and how much time it's taking them to do a specific task. So you really can manage your personnel a little clearer with it. It's a wonderful tool, really wonderful.
So we will look into the CSI answers. Pat can make a call with regards to that, and then we can let you know. As far as speaking to like eSchool or CSIU, I don't know any, we would have, I don't know that we need to do that right now. And then we can report back to you on Monday, and then you can make a decision, okay?
Thank you.
And then next we have the award of the environmental consultant, we need one, RFP. Mr. who's speaking to that one?
The environmental consultant, the RFP, Pat, are you speaking to that? Or Paul, are you speaking to that?
Well, it's currently issued. Pat, how many people?
So we put out for the environmental consulting, we put out an RFP a few weeks ago for the consulting, testing, product oversight, and some prevention of criteria related to the AHERA 6-month and 3-year water testing, indoor air quality when needed, microbial testing, lead and radon. Those are some of the categories that were covered in it. So far, we've had a lot of interest in it. I believe there's been 20 firms so far that have requested a copy of the RFP. They are due on Thursday, and Paul and I will open them and review them and provide a recommendation for you for Monday.
And I think we need to note that there was previous to this administration, there was an environmental RFP that was put out, and nobody,
I believe it was in May, it was around the summer of 2019, and there was no responses.
And what is certainly we've gotten a lot of press around our environmentalist issues, so perhaps that's having an impact. But where did you advertise these that was different?
Strand times for the required 3 weeks.
So nothing different than you did before?
No.
Something to do.
Thank you. Moving on?
Okay, we have the West Scranton Little League Agreement, which is resolved up for resolution, I understand, next week. And the track repair estimates.
yes, Mr. Gentilessa will speak to that.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Our track, which is, I think, the mecca of the area, and it's the biggest venue. It hosts most postseason invitationals, as well as being a home site for Scranton and West Scranton. It hosts districts, so it is the premier area for our track activities in the entire region. The track was laid down and installed, I believe, in my son's junior year, which was 2003. And it is ending, its lifespan is coming to an end. And, no pun intended, but it's run its course, basically. And last year or two, there's been rips, there's been tears, there's been worn out areas where we've had the company come back and do patch-up work. So in the last year or so, we've called on 5 companies to come and give us an estimate on doing an entire resurfacing of the track. And that, roughly about all of them came in a ballpark of $400,000. It has to be done soon, but we talked back in the fall after these 5 companies did their estimates, and we decided to switch gears a little bit and put it off another year or so and ask them to give us an updated estimate of fixing all the sore spots due to our financial concerns. But like I said, it's eventually, we're gonna eventually have to swallow that pill sometime. So right now, I do have one company that gave us an estimate roughly of about $7,800. The second company is coming in Thursday morning to do their estimate, and I did contact the other 3, I did not hear from them. So that's where we're at right now with our track. I mean, it's, like I said, it's eventually gonna have to be done. And it's like I said, it's the premier facility in the area, so we host many postseason events, invitationals, and districts.
Do the repairs you're recommending get us through this season?
Yeah. We like to do that now at the latest, early summer after the track season. But I know Mr. Anderson is really interested in getting it done now because for the upcoming season and for the upcoming events. So I'll just to give you an update on that.
So will you have all your estimates next week?
Well, I heard back I did call back on the 5 companies, Nagel, Bainan, Keystone, Turf Techs, and Copeland. Nagel gave us an estimate of $78.49. Keystone's coming in Thursday morning. I have yet to hear back from the other 3. I did let them know that's what we're going to do last fall, that we are going to put off the complete resurface and just fix up the sore spots to give us an estimate. I didn't hear too much from them over the winter, so I called upon them last week to see if they want to come and give us an estimate. So we're going to have at least 2 out of the 5 by the end of this week.
Bert, just for clarification, you meant 7,849, not 78,000?
7849, 7,000,
Eight, yeah.
yeah, 849. Did I say 78,000?
No, but I just wanted everyone to understand.
7,849 long.
And then it would at least be safe for this season,
It'll
you're
be
saying
safe
for the
this
kids?
season. That's, you know, that's another concern. It's a safety, it could become a safety issue down the road, so eventually we're gonna have to be looking to resurface it. And we did do some touch-up work to the field. As a matter of fact, we had the field groomed this past fall to really liven it up and patch some tears in the field turf. And it really did a good job to hold up, and I recommend that we do that every year. It really helped out this year as far as livening up the surface in the field. So it needs work and it needs maintenance for upkeep.
Is it worth investigating some possibilities of getting grants for that and some sort of things? There are a lot of people in this country who love their sports and who have a lot of things, maybe given the position of the track as being a regional resource. Maybe we can look at seeing if we can find some group with money to help us with that. I'm wondering whether that's worth pursuing. Just looking at, briefly, because $400,000 is a chunk of change.
Yes, and our CRO sitting next to us and saying it's not happening.
Yeah, no, I was kind of seeing it out of the corner of my eye, so I'm thinking, well, if she won't give us the money, who else can we get?
I'm already getting it whispered to in my ear. Don't worry.
Do any other organizations use the track? Any local colleges or any other
The University of
non-district?
Scranton does, that's where
University of
they
Scranton
practice.
does. They
don't
practice
have
there.
any events.
Yeah.
I have a daughter that runs.
And do they
They do
rent-
practice
rent
there.
for those?
And what we do is we have an agreement, which I'm working on our current MOU for this year, that we have a trade-off. Our baseball teams, mainly West Scranton Baseball, uses their new athletic complex down on Southside, for games and situations, just in case if there's tide at the Battalion Field. And if Scranton could get a couple games on there, they'll let them too, and for practices. So we kind of do a trade-off.
And if we don't get this completed, would that interfere with that agreement? If we don't get this track to you, would it interfere with the practice or anything? Could it possibly interfere with the agreement?
I don't think, if we do this repair, I don't think we'll.
I'm saying if we don't, like if we.
If we
have-
don't,
yeah.
no, because they just use it for practice.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you.
You want me to talk about the West Scranton League? Is there any discussion?
Or there wasn't any discussion.
No, I
What do you have?
Wes, if you'd like to give a brief.
Just an update, our 3-year contract is coming to an end. We have an agreement with them, and there was a little bit of, not confusion, but back 2 years ago, when the season was underway, we didn't have a contract probably right until like April. And we have a current contract with the city of us being primary tenant of the Talia Field. The contract started April 15, 2018, and it will expire April 14, 2021. So we are currently in the last year. It will seep into the spring sports season a little bit next year. But we are the primary tenant holder for Battalion Field for the months of April 15th to June 15th. And then the Little League takes it over from June to September, June 15th, June 16th to September 16th. So right now, I've been working with Mr. Laffey because there's been a little bit of, going back and forth, who's responsible for the bills on the other 6 months of the season. So we're working on that right now. We're working with West Scranton people on that situation with the Battalion Field. So we're in constant communication with them, so we'll get everything ironed out. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Bert.
Mr. Schuster?
We'll have a resolution to approve the personnel report. Is that all the personnel?
Well, thank you for being so efficient. Ms. Bruce?
So next week, we will have a resolution on first reading of policies 202, 323, 707, 805.2, 810.1, 904, and second read on policies 233 and 626 attachment, and second read on the administrative review of policies 200, 201, 204. We're also going to discuss policy 626 and policy 905.
In terms of policy 626, the recommended,
Federal.
yes, federal fiscal compliance. What are the changes being recommended here, and are these recovery plan initiatives, or these PSBA initiatives?
Not recovery plan.
No.
Okay. So,
And I know you had some additional information.
Policy 626, the last time it was amended was May 2018.
okay.
So it hasn't been amended if there are any new updates since that time.
So why is this on our agenda? That's what I'm trying to clarify here. What changes have been proposed to this?
Weren't we asked to put that up?
No, I mean, I know why it's
We were asked to put that
on,
up,
but
yeah.
it's on here as a second read.
Oh.
What I'm trying to clarify is what were the changes that brought this forward to us last month?
It may be on a current volume, it may be being updated by PSBA right now, and like, that's why I'm thinking of Nina put that on.
Yeah, because we can't find any changes, so.
It might be on a current volume, that's
Exactly.
how.
I think she said it's just the attachment, right, not the whole policy.
I don't know, that's.
So
Is that the bid threshold?
it's
I
possible
wonder, is it
that,
the bid threshold? And is it with the Department of Labor threshold?
Okay.
Which could
Which
be, and you know how that,
increases
right, that increases annually with, that's kind of what we've been talking about, so that's a possibility.
so we are accepting this as a proposal from PSBA, and now at our policy committee meeting, we need to go back and put our own.
Right, because as you know, that this conflicts with what our own policy is.
Right.
So we have different thresholds depending on what it is that we're dealing with.
So we are accepting this as the federal recommendation by PSBA, but we have our own
Our own
That's
policy
ability
610.
to
Correct.
change that to be in line with this, or to explain why it isn't,
Correct.
essentially.
Yes.
Sarah, are you, that, I know those were all my questions. Are you comfortable with my questions? Okay.
And
I
then,
do know that PSBA, although they may recommend, they have to recommend it for the entire state and every district in the state. However, if we want to tighten up our own policies, we are allowed to tighten up our own.
meaning we can make them stricter,
Yes.
not more.
Yes.
Correct.
And then we're also going to be discussing policy 905.
Yes, and I have some information to share with everybody on that. I'm sure you all noticed in your packets that I did ask last week that this be added to the agenda, because I know we have a lot of interested parents who want to come forward and talk about our current issues, but also, I'm sure, a lot of other issues, not just specific to the challenges we're facing right now. And it was actually a conversation that Mr. Schuster and I had with Dr. Finan and Mrs. McTiernan on January 14th, that community advisory committees were something we wanted to see this board enact and mobilize. So I asked that the policy be brought forward tonight so we could be aware of how that is defined in our policies and discuss how we could go forward with that. Interestingly enough, in the conversation that we had a call this morning with the Scranton Federation of Teachers and some representatives from the UFT and the AFT. That was something that they recommended as something that would help us with our communication, and also it was something that came up in the conversation with Cacciardi and Associates this afternoon in their efforts to help us improve our communication with their fact sheets and frequently asked questions. They suggested this as well. So I've shared the notes from the AFT representatives, said that they would make some suggestions as to how we could maybe move forward with this in asking for people with specific qualifications to come forward. And I think we as a board, since the policy defines that we establish the advisory committee, I think we can name this environmental task force was suggested this morning. I certainly think that works. But I think we need to talk about how we would select these people, because I think we want to make sure that it is open to anyone interested and that we do it in a transparent fashion, but also that we are not handpicking people that we think are going to suit our ideas and goals, that this is comprehensive. So do you want to read what the SFT shared, Sarah?
Yes, sure. So, it says right here, the district is looking for 3 parent volunteers to participate in a district steering committee. And so we're going to choose a committee name such as asbestos committee, executive committee, to learn more about the current asbestos conditions in our schools. In addition to the 3 parents, this collaborative committee will be made up of representatives from the district, school board, unions, and representatives from the asbestos consulting firm. Committee members can expect to participate in the following: educational sessions about asbestos-containing building materials, also known as ACBM, and how they will be maintained by the district. This will include reviewing Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act, also known as OHARA plans, and reports for each of the schools, and understanding key concepts and terms related to asbestos conditions. Walkthroughs of the schools to learn what to look for during an inspection. This will include a walkthrough of Northeast prior to reopening of the school to learn about what abatement and remediation steps have been taken. Committee members will need to be available on weekends and before or after school hours for inclusion in walkthroughs of any schools.
Can I just say, this was also suggested to me by parents, but they, in their suggestion, they included a parent from each school. I don't know if I don't think they did limiting it to 3 parents.
I mean, this was something that was suggested by both of these bodies to keep this a more manageable working group. I certainly think this could be a place to start. I certainly think 4 parents instead of 3 parents is something we could consider, because it definitely part of the conversation was we want more parent representation than any of the other entities. If it's one board member, the policy dictates that the superintendent and the board president will be a member ex officio. So, my suggestion would be to ask Ro to serve as operations chairperson, to ask Mr. Doherty to serve until someone comes and takes this away from him. Let's hope, for his sake, for the interim. And perhaps Sarah and I did discuss this earlier today, in order to make this as fair and efficient, I did think that perhaps we could post this request on the district website and ask that people, similar to the way we did the recovery committee, submit a letter of interest detailing their qualifications. I would ask Mrs. Orr to redact the names, and perhaps depending on the number of applicants we got, maybe we could ask either Cacciardi or Datum or the people from the SFT or the AFT to look at these just based on qualifications, bring us a list of 10, and we could select these people based on those qualifications from there. I think there's an opportunity to add people to this. I think we also want to make sure that we are paying attention to the existing structures such as the PTAs and the PTA councils for parent representation. I also don't think this has to be, I hope it won't be, our only community advisory committee. I think if we can start here and start quickly so that we can have this group participate in the work that we are undertaking right now, perhaps in review of the work that will be done over the summer, and walkthroughs as soon as is possible, specifically in Northeast, but anywhere else we identify issues.
Do we need to put a resolution on at the the voting meeting next week
I-
to establish this?
I think we could, and I think we could also appoint people at that time if we were able to do this quickly enough.
Okay.
And would
You know,
they be open meetings? Sorry.
no, that's okay. They are, that does say that here.
By invitation.
By invitation, thank you.
Oh, so,
Meetings of an advisory committee are not regular meetings of the board and shall be open to the public only upon invitation of the committee. So I think that could be at the committee's discretion. You know, if the committee had an issue, it was debating, similar to what we did here tonight. We needed to gather information, ask our own questions, and then bring it forward. I think if the committee felt they needed quarterly sessions to do that and would meet twice a year in a public setting, that would be fine. But I think we can define all of those things as we put a resolution together.
I have one question, and maybe I missed this. So the environmental, this, and I know I was with you all day, so I know that we talked about
Yes,
this,
we
but
did spend a great deal of
this,
time together.
the environmental, there has to be somebody from an environmental expert on there, correct?
Yes,
Because
that's what-
Otherwise, we'd all be looking at each other.
Right, that's what the SST is recommending.
And I would think, like Sam says, we're looking for parent participation in this. I think parents who have careers in these fields would be the ones who
Yeah.
we're
I
looking
believe-
for. I think that would be.
I know there was a
Right.
parent at Willard that was able to
Right.
help answer some questions,
Right.
but that's my
I mean,
concern. is that we're-
they suggested today firefighters, police officers, engineers, plumbers, you know, people who work in those industries where they may have dealt with these things. And, you know, I don't think it has to be limited to only that, but I think that's the focus of the kind of background we are looking for. And I think it's a step in the right direction.
If it's possible to pass a resolution establishing a committee next week, can we then move forward within a couple of days to have an initial meeting? Because the quicker
It's
the
fine,
better.
fine by me.
That's all right, I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to sound like Barney Granger, but I think the quicker we.
No, I mean,
we
that,
can get input.
that would
I
certainly
think
be
that-
up to the committee,
Yeah,
but.
seats at the table
I
and
think so.
voices are very important, and I think we can do that. That would be good. That would be great.
You call the committee as best as you can.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh,
how long were you waiting for
Wait
that?
till
You see, this is way too long.
So,
so is that gonna be set in writing though, 3 parents and that's it? Cause I kinda like the idea of opening it up more. That's just my thought.
what is everybody else?
So it's an advisory committee, so I don't know that it has to be a huge committee. And if we're going to staff it with experts, I don't know how many.
Because if we had a parent from each school, it'd be like,
It'd be,
And I don't know if there would be one parent from each school that wanted to do it, but why not give them the option?
well, they'll have the option to apply.
I think trying to expand later.
I mean, perhaps we should say that if we get the applications from the parents and the qualifications show that there are 4 or 5 people with the qualifications in the various areas, sure, then we can consider expanding it then. But the idea of trying to herd cats with a committee of 22 people is not appealing.
I mean, I think we could look at this 2 ways. I have no problem with saying 4 instead of 3. I don't think that was a number that I was actually expecting 4 to be on this paper today. But 3 is an odd number, and maybe that's a good thing. But I also think saying at least 3 is maybe a good way, because you're right, if we do get half a dozen people who really would be an asset to this, maybe they're not available every time also.
You might want to think about one from every level with a substitute. If somebody can't make it, then you have a backup. So if you take elementary, middle, intermediate, and high school, then at least they can feed the information about their level. That might work.
Do you have some experience that you're offering this conversation? Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, and then if we need to expand, we can discuss that, and hopefully we'll be talking about more of these around other subjects. So we will firm up the language in this, get it out to everybody, make sure everybody's comfortable, and then we can post it on the website. And I would hope to solicit names by Friday, and then ask if our environmental people are comfortable assessing this, or if somebody from the SFT or the AFT, the representatives that they've sent, with names redacted, totally based on,
Yeah.
you're gonna be the only one who knows, Ginny. Okay. And then we will get a resolution with committee names for next week. Special education, Mr. Malloy?
Yes, items for consideration at the March 2nd meeting under special education consist of a resolution to approve settlement agreements and a resolution to approve the NEIU budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021.
Okay.
And I think Mr. McAndrew is going to need a copy of that, because I think that came in a part of the packet. Do you?
I have to.
No, I mean the NEIU budget.
I have one.
So you do have it?
Actually, I think
Okay.
I think I've got mine here, I think
So-
I've read it, so.
We'll just,
Such a crunchy.
we'll get you lots of copies. That is all we have.
I'm sorry to do this to you, it's Hermione Granger again.
You get that I don't know what that means, right?
Oh, she's the great, it's from Harry Potter, and she is the absolute conscientious kid that reads all
You
the
say it a
books and
lot,
does all
right?
that
No
stuff.
idea.
No, it is, she's just the nerdy girl that does all the homework and is a real pain in the neck.
Oh.
So I'm happy to wear both those labels. The PSBA report I will have prepared for next Monday's meeting, but part of it is there's a resolution that the PSBA has put around which Dr. Finan sent out, which is about, they're asking all of the school boards to pass a resolution supporting the charter law reform that Governor Wolf has introduced. They have the form of words, I've got it, did we put it in the packets or not? We put it in the parties. I can email it to you, I have it in the form anyway. But they're asking us to support the charter reforms which Wolf has proposed, which limit the amount of district contribution to charter school students for special education and all of that. I speak to that.
I can, sure.
Yeah.
The state has worked diligently on looking for a more fair way to fund charter and cyber charter schools. Fair from the point of view of the public school having to pay for that. So that what they basically have done is they've come up with an average cost. So as opposed to every specific charter school and cyber charter school having a different cost and us paying the fee based on the number of students, that they would, we would pay an average cost. And that would be a very positive thing for this school district. We would benefit tremendously. The estimate, and I'm not promising that it's an estimate at this point, would be, we would see a positive $1.1 million, which that's why I think it would be wise to pass that resolution. This has been, they've looked for a way to more fairly treat the cost of cyber and charter schools. And I think this is a more fair way because they've come up with an average. So it is, it's a real step in the right direction. It's about 20 years in the making, just so you know.
I put a little summary in yesterday, but I'd like to see if we can add that to the agenda for next week. Rather than blindside you, that I can email around through the official wheel, the summary as to why they think this is a good thing, plus the actual resolution.
Yeah.
But the PSBA is very strongly asking every district to do it.
Yes.
It's on
I thought it was on the agenda.
It is.
It is on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Oh, sorry,
It
it's
is
not
on
on
the
here.
agenda.
Under budget and finance.
Under budget and finance.
Oh, yes, okay. I am.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see that, because I apologize. I got my homework wrong.
I was gonna ask you about that, because again, there's something else I know nothing about. Could you tell us about the District 2?
Yes, we have 2 teams that are gonna be playing for the district championship on Saturday. West Scranton Lady Invaders, I believe we're at 6 o'clock, and Scranton High School Scranton is at 8 o'clock, the boys, at Mohegan Sun Arena. So we're super excited about that.
Wow.
Yes.
That's great, that's a great deal.
Thank you very much. And I am also being reminded that we did want to mention, Mr. Doherty, maybe you can explain exactly what this means, but that Mr. Puglisi has been trained to be the designated person for the asbestos reporting.
Yes, Mr. Puglisi, who is one of our main supervisors, he is now the designated person in the district, which you're required to have one. But he has been trained by Kachardi this week, and as part of that training, we're going to start doing our own 6-month periodic surveillances in-house, which is actually what most districts do. So Kachardi will go with him on the first time he does the 6-month periodic assessment, training him and teaching him exactly what to be looking at during those surveillances.
And this is something that came up at our first meeting with the UFT representatives.
Yes, correct.
That is, as you said, the normal course of
That's
action,
correct.
that you do that in-house. And then your 3-year reassessments are done by an outside consultant, ideally not by the same one every 3 years, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. The only other thing I have is that next week we are meeting at the Career Technology Center with dinner provided by Chef McAndrew and his students for I'm sorry, it's not for everybody, but for us at 5 o'clock. But you know, we eat light, so maybe there'll be leftovers. And we will have our meeting there, so I'm excited for everybody to get a chance to be there. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you, everybody. Motion to adjourn, please.
Motion.